Welcome to The Tired Thinker, where curiosity doesn't rush and questions linger longer than answers. Tonight's quiet ache belongs to the mind's sharper edges, the thought experiments that hurt, the ones that start as harmless what-ifs, but spiral slowly, endlessly, into the kind of wondering that keeps you awake. What if I'm not the same person I was yesterday? What if consciousness is just a trick of light? What if meaning isn't something we find, but something we invent? These questions don't resolve. They stretch, they bend, they press against the walls of what we think we know. And maybe that's the point, to feel the friction of thinking deeply, to learn that discomfort can be a teacher too. So tonight, we'll wander gently through the thoughts that sting and see what they reveal beneath the ache. No rush, no answers, just awareness. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it? In your small, thinking corner of the world. It's strange, isn't it? How we can feel alone in our heads, yet somehow share the same ache for understanding. If this space helps you think softly, if it gives you a moment to sit with your own questions, I'd be so grateful if you liked the video or quietly subscribed. It helps this small, weary channel find others who think and feel the same. Now, let's begin. You wake up and for a moment, before your thoughts catch up, you just exist. No words, no stories. You feel your weight in the bed, hear the quiet hum of the room, maybe the faint sound of your own breathing. Then, like a small switch, awareness turns on. You think, I'm awake, and from that instant, you are no longer only living, you're watching yourself live. That tiny shift from being to noticing being changes everything. It's the first mirror. Most people think mirrors are objects made of glass, but the most powerful one is in your mind. It's built from reflection, the act of seeing yourself as if from outside. Every time you pause to think about who you are, how you appear, what you believe, or how others see you, you stand in front of that mirror. You think you're just observing, but the truth is, the act of looking changes the thing being looked at. Imagine someone walking across a stage. They move freely, unaware of the audience. Their steps are natural, their gestures loose. Now imagine they realize they're being watched. Their walk stiffens. They adjust their clothes. They edit themselves in real time. The performance changes because observation entered the scene. This is what self-awareness does. The moment you see yourself, you start to shape yourself. You might notice this in small ways. You're speaking to a friend and suddenly become aware of your own voice. It sounds too loud or too soft or too uncertain. You try to correct it. The moment is no longer flowing. You're inside it and outside it at once. Or maybe you're sitting in silence and you ask yourself, am I happy? The instant you form the question, the feeling shifts. You were just feeling before. Now you're measuring the feeling. This loop between doing and noticing is part of being human. It helps us grow and correct mistakes. But it also creates tension, because once you become aware of yourself, you can't fully go back to being unaware. Every thought about who you are changes who you are. The reflection becomes the next version of you, which then becomes the next reflection. Think about journaling. Many people write to understand themselves better. You describe your day, your fears, your hopes. You think you're capturing the truth. But writing about your day changes how you remember it. You highlight what matters to you, and by doing that, you make those parts bigger. You may not notice it, but the story becomes slightly edited each time you tell it. Reflection isn't a photograph, it's a painting, redrawn each time the brush moves. The brain works this way too. When you recall a memory, your neurons reassemble the experience. The pattern isn't identical to the first time. It's rebuilt with new context, new emotion. Each recall slightly rewires it. Over years, remembering who you were slowly reshapes who you believe you are. This is why people sometimes feel they've changed without trying to. It's not that you wake up one day as someone else. It's that you've been thinking yourself into new shapes. Every act of self-reflection is also an act of self-construction. There's an old psychological study that explored this idea in a simple way. Two groups of students were asked to solve a series of puzzles. One group sat in a room with a mirror in front of them. The other didn't. The mirrored group performed more carefully, followed rules more strictly, and took fewer risks. Seeing themselves made them behave differently. The mirror didn't change the puzzles, it changed the people. This happens internally too. You don't need an actual mirror, just self-awareness. When you think, "I'm the kind of person who always helps others," that thought begins to guide your choices. You'll help more often, even when tired, because your identity now includes the helper. But if one day you think, "I'm selfish," that version of yourself starts to take shape as well. The mind obeys the stories it tells. You can test this quietly. Next time you're alone, imagine that someone is observing you through a camera. Not in a fearful way, just imagine that your actions are being seen. Notice how your body changes. You might sit straighter, you might tidy your space. The awareness of being watched shifts behavior. Now think about how many times a day you mentally watch yourself, deciding how you sound, how you look, whether you're enough. It's like living with a mirror that never turns off. This is why thought experiments can hurt, because once you question your identity, you can't stop the ripple. Consider this. If your self-image changes every time you think about it, is there ever a stable you beneath it all? If you try to find the core self, the search itself disturbs the stillness. It's like trying to see your reflection in water. The moment you move, the surface ripples. Maybe that's why some people chase stillness through meditation, sitting quietly, noticing thoughts without grabbing them, letting them rise and fade. It's an attempt to step out of the mirror, but even then, the observer remains, watching yourself try to stop watching. The paradox continues. A mirror mind isn't a flaw, it's how consciousness works. Awareness is recursive, it folds back on itself. This recursion allows art, morality, empathy. You can imagine how others see you and how you affect them, but it also breeds self-consciousness, doubt, and overthinking. The same tool that lets you reflect is the one that keeps you from resting. Imagine a painter who begins a self-portrait. They start with simple outlines. Then they notice a detail that feels off and fix it. Then another. Hours pass and they're lost in adjustment. Each correction reveals a new flaw. The image never feels finished because the painter's sense of self keeps evolving as they paint. That's what it's like to think deeply about yourself. The portrait never ends because you're changing while you draw. Some people find this realization freeing. If the self isn't fixed, then it can be reshaped. You can grow, adapt, heal. Others find it unsettling. If there's no permanent you, then what anchors meaning? Both feelings are valid. The mind isn't built for easy answers. It's built for endless questioning, like an echo that keeps checking if the cave is still there. There's a quiet danger in too much reflection, though. When you turn inward too often, you can lose touch with the external world. You start analyzing your every move, rehearsing every conversation, anticipating judgment before it happens. The mirror becomes fogged with projections. You stop seeing what is and only see what you fear or expect. Over time, this can create a split, a self that lives and a self that watches, each unsure which is real. Think about how children play. They don't yet carry this split. They act first and think later. They fall, laugh, cry, explore. They don't ask, "Am I doing this right?" They just do. Somewhere along the way, we start asking that question. We learn to measure, compare, analyze. Awareness sharpens, but so does hesitation. The goal isn't to stop reflecting. That would mean losing awareness altogether. The goal is to reflect gently, to know that the mirror distorts, and still look anyway. To think about yourself without assuming the thought captures the whole of you. The self you see is always a momentary version, not the final one. Picture a lake at dawn. The surface is smooth, the reflection sharp. But even then, the image isn't you. It's water playing with light. The real you stands on the shore, breathing, alive, always changing. The mind's mirror will show you shapes, but not essence. You are not the reflection. You are the act of noticing it. And that act, that simple, continuous noticing, is what makes you conscious. It's what makes you human. The mirror mind is both the source of our deepest confusion and our deepest insight. Every thought about yourself is a step into becoming someone new. The glass doesn't just reflect, it reshapes. Every time you look, the image looks back, and quietly, you both change. Imagine a ship at sea. Years pass, and each time a plank rots, the sailors replace it. They replace the sails, the mast, even the nails that hold it together. After decades, not a single original piece remains. Yet the ship still sails under the same name. The same flag flies above it. The same crew calls it home. This is the ship of Theseus, one of philosophy's oldest thought experiments. It asks a simple question that hurts the longer you sit with it. If every part of something changes, does it stay the same thing? Now bring that question closer. Think of yourself. Every cell in your body replaces itself over time. Your skin renews in weeks, your blood in months, your bones in years. The physical you of 10 years ago no longer exists. Even your brain, which feels permanent, rewires itself through experience and memory. So, if the ship of your body and mind has been rebuilt piece by piece, plank by plank, are you still you, or are you just the story that remembers being you? People tend to think identity is something solid, like a stone that sits unchanged no matter how many waves hit it. But maybe it's more like a river, always moving, always replacing itself, yet still recognized by name. You can point at a stretch of water and say, "That's the same river I swam in last summer," even though none of the water is the same. It flows, and we call it continuous because our minds prefer stories that don't break. Continuity gives comfort. You might notice this in your own memories. Think back to your childhood, the person who played in that yard, who feared the dark, who laughed at small things. Does that person still exist? You share their name, maybe their voice, but the way you think now would feel foreign to them. You wouldn't choose the same friends, the same dreams. Yet you call that earlier version me. The link is not made of matter, it's made of memory. Memory is the bridge that lets identity cross time. But what happens when memory fades or changes? Imagine someone with amnesia who forgets their past completely. They wake up without a single memory of who they were. Their habits, their preferences, their emotional reactions all begin to rebuild from scratch. Are they the same person as before? Legally, yes. Biologically, yes. But psychologically, maybe not. The thread of continuity snaps when memory disappears, and yet they still have a self. A new one forms as the old one dissolves. The ship keeps sailing, even if the map gets lost. This question doesn't only live in philosophy classrooms, it appears in everyday life. Think about someone who's been through something life-changing, a war, an illness, a deep loss. They often say, "I'm not the same person anymore." It's not just a metaphor. Traumatic or transformative events can rewire how the brain processes the world. Old beliefs fall apart, new ones grow. The version of you before the event might no longer fit inside the person after. Yet both versions live inside one body, one lifetime. Which one is the real you? Consider another example: your online life. You post photos, share thoughts, build a digital record of yourself, but the you online doesn't update every time you change inside. It stays frozen in old jokes, old opinions, old hairstyles. People meet that version long after you've moved on. They interact with the ghost of who you were. In some ways, your digital self becomes a museum of your discarded planks. It's the ship of me, archived in pixels. Neuroscience adds another layer to this puzzle. Inside your brain, neurons connect and disconnect every moment. The self you feel, the sense of I, emerges from these networks. It's not a single spot in the brain. It's an ongoing pattern, a living loop of signals that interprets experience. When those patterns shift, your sense of self shifts too. For instance, after a brain injury or even a long bout of depression, people often describe feeling like strangers to themselves. Their personality feels altered, even though they remember who they are. The ship still carries the same name, but its direction has changed. Even in smaller ways, you can see identity shifting daily. You act differently at work than at home, differently with family than with friends. You speak with different tones, use different words. Each context calls forward a different version of you. None of them are fake. They're all parts of a flexible self, shaped by setting and need. It's like a ship adjusting its sails to the wind. The structure remains adaptable, not fixed. Language shows how deeply this idea runs. We say things like, "I found myself," or "I lost myself," or "I'm not myself today." These phrases suggest that the self is something that can move, vanish, or reappear. But what if there isn't one stable thing to find or lose? What if identity is more like a dance, real only while it's happening, never frozen in one step? Imagine you move to a new city. Over time, you pick up new habits, new slang, new tastes. You change your wardrobe, your schedule, your priorities. You may feel like the same person, but if you met your past self, the two of you might disagree about almost everything. You'd argue about values, music, love, even about what matters most in life. Which one would be right? Both of you would claim to be me, yet neither would fully recognize the other. The ship sailed in two directions, and both were real journeys. Philosophers have wrestled with this problem for centuries. John Locke said, "Personal identity depends on memory. If you remember doing something, then it was you who did it." But others argue that memory alone can't hold it all together. After all, we forget most of our lives. Does that mean the forgotten parts don't belong to us anymore? Derek Parfit, a modern philosopher, took it further. He said that what matters isn't identity at all, but psychological continuity, the overlapping connections of memory, thought, and emotion that tie one moment to the next. To him, the self is more like a chain than a single link. Break enough links, and what's left is something new. You can feel this directly when you look back on old mistakes. Maybe you said something cruel years ago or acted selfishly. You remember it, but it feels like watching someone else. You can't imagine making the same choice now. The memory belongs to you, but the person in it doesn't. That gap between recognition and distance, shows how fluid identity can be. The ship that made that mistake no longer sails these waters, even though it carries the same name. Technology will make this question even stranger. Scientists are exploring ways to store human consciousness digitally or copy a mind into a machine. If every memory, thought, and feeling could be transferred to another body or device, would that still be you? Or would it be a replica that only believes it's you? The ship of me takes on a new ocean, the digital one, where identity might not need a body at all. But we don't need science fiction to feel this drift. You already rebuild yourself every day through routine change. You learn, forget, forgive, and adapt. Every habit, every conversation, every quiet thought adds or removes a plank. You can't stop it. Growth demands replacement, yet the strange comfort is this. Even if everything in you changes, the pattern of becoming remains. The will to continue, to navigate meaning, to steer through uncertainty, that's the part that persists. You're both the ship and the sea. You're the builder and the passenger. Each version of you builds the next, not knowing it will one day be replaced. And maybe that's what makes the question hurt, because deep down, you sense that nothing about you stays forever, but you keep sailing anyway. Picture a room with smooth walls. Every sound you make comes back to you. Slightly changed, but still yours. You speak again to correct the echo, but it answers louder. Soon you can't tell which voice is yours and which is the reflection. This is what happens in the mind when thoughts begin to bounce without interruption. You stop hearing the world. You only hear yourself. An echo chamber doesn't need to be built from stone or glass. It can exist inside a human brain. It begins when you repeat the same idea long enough that it starts to feel like truth. The repetition comforts you. The familiarity feels safe. But safety can become a trap when it keeps new information out. You can see this happen online every day. Someone scrolls through their feed and only sees opinions that match their own. Algorithms notice what they like and give them more of it. Over time, the digital walls close in. Each post confirms what they already believe. Each agreement feels like validation. The world outside grows quieter, while the echo inside grows louder. But this pattern doesn't belong only to the internet. It starts in smaller places, in personal fault loops. You make a mistake at work and think, I'm not good enough. The thought bounces back, I always mess things up. The next echo adds weight. People must see me as a failure. Soon the chamber fills with one voice, repeating different versions of the same judgment. The longer it goes on, the more real it sounds. Not because it's true, but because it's loud. The brain reinforces what it repeats. Neurons that fire together wire together. That's how learning works, but it's also how rumination works. When a thought repeats often enough, the neural pathway becomes smoother. The brain takes that route automatically, even when it leads nowhere. That's why certain worries or self-criticisms feel magnetic. They pull your attention back before you realize it. Imagine driving a car with a bent steering wheel. No matter how straight you try to go, the car drifts to one side. You can fight it for a while, but unless you fix the alignment, the drift returns. That's what mental echo chambers do. They bend your thinking slightly off-center until your mind keeps steering back to the same conclusion. There's a strange comfort in this repetition. It gives the illusion of control. When you already know what you'll think next, nothing can surprise you. Uncertainty disappears, but so does growth. Curiosity dies in silence. This echo can form in relationships too. Two people share the same fear or resentment, and instead of helping each other see differently, they reinforce it. They trade the same sentences until the sentences harden into belief. Everyone is selfish. No one listens. The world doesn't change. These phrases sound like observations, but they're really walls. They keep the outside world out. Even entire groups can fall into shared echoes. History is full of movements, ideologies, and nations that lost sight of truth because they kept hearing their own voices reflected back. Once an idea becomes sacred inside an echo chamber, questioning it feels like betrayal. People stop seeking facts and start seeking confirmation. The echo becomes a rhythm that replaces thinking. You can find smaller versions of this inside your own mind. A single worry can fill the same space as a crowd. Say you're anxious about your health. You feel a pain and think, something's wrong. You search for it online and find a story that matches your fear. The story echoes your thought and sends it back amplified. This could be serious. You check again and again. Each search returns to the same idea, louder each time. Soon, it's not the symptom causing distress. It's the echo itself. Breaking this loop requires contact with something outside it. You need a new sound, a different note, to interfere with the rhythm. Sometimes that's another person. Someone who listens without judgment, but speaks from a place outside your circle. Sometimes it's an experience that doesn't fit your pattern. Travel, art, nature, even silence can break the loop because they interrupt repetition. The mind needs friction to stay alive. But it's hard to let in friction when the echo feels safe. Many people avoid disagreement, not because they dislike others, but because disagreement shakes identity. Your opinions and beliefs become part of who you think you are. If someone challenges them, it feels personal, like they're scraping at the walls of your chamber. The instinct is to defend, not to listen. The echo survives another day. Social media intensifies this instinct. When likes, shares, and follows reward agreement, the mind learns that approval equals safety. People shape their thoughts to fit what the room wants to hear. Over time, the self becomes an algorithm, repeating what worked last time, avoiding what didn't. The chamber stops being a prison and becomes a performance space. But even outside screens, echo chambers can grow quietly. Think about how you interpret your own life. When something goes wrong, do you tell yourself the same story every time? This always happens to me. I should have known better. These are personal echoes, beliefs that bounce back so often they form identity. You don't need anyone else to keep them alive. You repeat them yourself until they become the wallpaper of your thoughts. Cognitive psychology calls this confirmation bias. The mind seeks evidence that supports what it already believes. If you think people can't be trusted, you'll notice every act of deceit and overlook every act of kindness. The world reflects back what you expect to see, and each reflection strengthens the original thought. It's like living in a hall of mirrors. You keep bumping into your own reflection and mistaking it for reality. The most painful echo chambers are the ones built from fear. Fear of rejection, failure, or loss can trap the mind in tight circles. You replay conversations, analyze facial expressions. Imagine worst-case outcomes. Each loop makes the fear feel more certain. The brain can't tell the difference between thought and evidence. If it feels true, it starts to seem true. That's why fear can be so convincing. It echoes in a pitch that sounds like proof. There's an experiment that shows how strong repetition can be. In it, people hear a statement repeated several times over days. Even if they knew it was false at first, Many later rated it as true simply because it sounded familiar. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. Familiarity becomes a stand-in for accuracy. The more often we hear something, even from ourselves, the more real it feels. Now imagine that happening inside your mind for years. A single repeated belief about your worth, your future, your past becomes a fact not because of evidence, but because of volume. The echo outlives the original thought. You can test this in small ways. Pick a belief you hold strongly, maybe about yourself or the world, and ask where you first heard it. Did someone teach it to you, or did you repeat it until it stuck? Then ask when you last challenged it. Many of our oldest thoughts never meet resistance again. They just sit, repeating, until they harden into identity. When thoughts bounce too long, they stop learning. They forget that reality moves. But awareness can open a crack in the wall, simply noticing the echo. Realizing that the voice in your head isn't always the voice of truth creates space for something new to enter. The echo grows quieter when it meets air. Silence helps too. Not the silence of suppression, but the kind that listens without reacting. When you let a thought pass without feeding it, it loses power. The chamber begins to dissolve because it relies on your participation to stay loud. The less you speak back to the echo, the more it fades into distance. The mind will always echo. That's part of thinking. But you can choose which thoughts deserve repetition and which can drift away. You can keep some lulls porous, let sound in, let truth in, let doubt in. The goal isn't to escape yourself, but to stop mistaking your reflection for the whole world. When a thought bounces back unchanged, it grows louder. When it meets something new, it grows wiser. There's a moment when awareness turns sharp, and you start watching yourself instead of simply being. You notice the way you move, the tone of your voice, the expression on your face. You see yourself through the eyes of someone else. At first, it feels like insight, like understanding. But the longer you look, the less natural you feel. The act of seeing changes the thing being seen. That's the trap. It's not only poetic, it's physical. In quantum physics, there's a principle called the observer effect. It says that measuring something changes it. A particle's behavior shifts the moment it's observed. It doesn't act the same way under watch as it does in freedom. The human mind works much the same way. Once you start watching your own thoughts, they shift. Awareness makes them behave differently. Think about being recorded. Someone points a camera at you, and suddenly the way you stand or speak feels wrong. You adjust. You try to appear natural, but the effort to appear natural makes you stiff. You're no longer just doing, you're performing. The same thing happens internally. When you turn your awareness on yourself, you stop being only a participant in life and become the critic as well. People who reflect deeply often feel this tension. They want to know themselves better, to see the truth of who they are. But the closer they look, the more distorted the picture becomes. Introspection can turn into an endless feedback loop. You see yourself, react to what you see, and then analyze that reaction. Each layer adds distance between who you are and who you appear to be. Take a simple example. You're having a conversation with a friend and suddenly think, "Do I sound boring right now?" The thought changes your tone. You become careful, maybe too careful. You start judging your own words before you speak them. Your focus shifts from connection to control. The friend senses the shift, and the flow breaks. The moment you observe yourself too closely, you stop being fully there. Social anxiety often grows from this same root. It's not the fear of others. It's the fear of being watched by yourself. You imagine how you must look, how your gestures appear, how your voice sounds. You build a second version of you in your mind, one that follows and comments on everything you do. That inner observer becomes louder than the world around you. The brain wasn't built to divide itself this way all the time. Self-awareness is a powerful tool, but it's meant to flicker, not to burn constantly. It helps you learn from mistakes, adjust behavior, and make sense of experience. But when it stays on too long, it starts to eat the moment. You begin living one step removed from life, watching it instead of feeling it. Artists and athletes know this problem well. A musician playing freely loses rhythm the moment they start thinking about their fingers. A runner stumbles when they start noticing their stride. Psychologists call this choking under pressure. Performance breaks when awareness turns inward. The body knows what to do, but the observer interrupts the flow. You can see this in emotional life, too. When you start analyzing a feeling while you're still inside it, you interrupt it. You might be sad. Then immediately start thinking, why am I sad? Should I be sad? The analysis stops the emotion halfway. It doesn't resolve, it freezes. Reflection works best after experience, not during it. There's a simple test for this. Think of the last time you felt spontaneous, laughing without thinking, speaking without planning, dancing without judgment. In those moments, you weren't split in two. You were both the doer and the observer in harmony. The awareness was still there, but it wasn't separate. The trap begins when that awareness steps out of sync and starts trying to manage the self. Some people try to escape this by avoiding reflection altogether. They fill every quiet moment with noise, with distraction, with work. They fear what happens when they're alone with their thoughts. But avoiding the observer doesn't silence it. It just hides it under motion. The goal isn't to stop noticing yourself. It's to learn how to notice without interference. Meditation often teaches this balance. You sit still, thoughts rise, and you watch them without chasing or judging. At first, it feels impossible. The mind wants to grab, to analyze, to control. But with time, you learn to observe without altering. You see thoughts as passing weather, present but not permanent. It's the closest we come to observation without distortion. Yet even in meditation, there's a subtle danger. The moment you think, I'm doing this well, or I'm finally calm, awareness flips back into judgment. You start evaluating again. The observer sneaks in through the side door. That's the trap inside the trap, awareness watching itself. The observer's trap shows up in identity too. You start defining yourself by what you notice. You say, I'm introspective, I'm overthinker, I'm self-aware. These labels sound neutral, but they shape behavior. You start performing the version of yourself that fits the label. Even self-knowledge becomes performance. It's easy to see how this can lead to exhaustion. Constant self-monitoring drains energy. It turns life into a series of corrections. You become both the artist and the critic at once, never satisfied with the result. Every step forward gets reviewed before it lands. You begin to miss the rawness of living unobserved. You can catch this pattern by noticing the moment when thought becomes commentary. When you find yourself saying, I shouldn't feel this way, or I need to stop thinking so much, that's the observer talking. Awareness is useful when it guides. It hurts when it polices. The key difference is tone. Curiosity instead of control. Seeing yourself clearly is a gift, but seeing yourself too clearly, too often, can make you brittle. You start mistaking reflection for truth, forgetting that even the clearest mirror bends light. Think about a small decision. You wake up and decide whether to get out of bed now or 5 minutes later. You choose one shirt over another. You answer or ignore a message. Each time, something quiet happens. One version of the day unfolds while another disappears. The path you didn't take fades from sight, but your mind still senses it. The unchosen moments stay close, like shadows that never quite leave. People talk about the multiverse as if it belongs to science fiction, a place where every decision splits into new worlds. In one version, you said yes. In another, you said no. One way you stayed, one where you left. Whether or not you believe in parallel realities, the idea stirs something deep. Because even inside one life, you carry traces of all the lives you could have lived. Memory works like a map of crossed-out routes. You look back and wonder what might have happened if you'd turned differently, gone to a different school, taken a different job, spoken your mind when you stayed silent. The mind replays these moments not because it enjoys regret, but because it's trying to complete unfinished loops. The human brain doesn't like open files. It wants every story to have an ending. But unmade choices never end. They just wait. Imagine standing at a train station. Several trains sit ready, each headed somewhere new. You board one. The doors close, and the others roll away. You watch them leave, knowing you'll never see where they went. That's what every decision feels like beneath the surface. You keep moving forward, but some part of you keeps glancing back at the trains you didn't board. In psychology, there's something called counterfactual thinking. It's the mental habit of imagining what could have happened if events had gone differently. You lose a job and think, if only I had tried harder. You meet someone new and think, what if we'd met years earlier? These thoughts aren't fantasies. They're ways your brain tests meaning. They help you understand cause and effect. But when they loop too long, they start to hurt. The mind mistakes imagination for loss. Everyone has their own collection of what-ifs. They build up quietly. The school you didn't attend, the person you didn't love, the apology you didn't make. They form ghost versions of you, the one who took that risk, or stayed home, or never left. You meet them in daydreams or late-night thoughts. They look like you, but move differently, shaped by the small decisions that built their world. You might notice this when you reconnect with an old friend. You talk, and for a moment you feel who you were around them. The version of you from that time wakes up. You laugh in a way you haven't in years. The conversation ends, and the feeling fades. That version of you slips back into memory, still alive somewhere inside the folds of your mind. The self is not one solid line. It's a collection of overlapping versions, all whispering to each other through time. The brain itself makes this easier to believe. Every experience you have rewires it slightly. Neural connections strengthen or weaken based on attention. If you had taken another path, your brain would have become physically different. Each choice literally builds a different you. So in one sense, infinite versions of you could exist, not in space, but in potential. Every unmade decision represents a path your brain could have built, but didn't. Even small choices ripple. You decide to take a walk, and you meet someone who changes your life. You decide to stay in, and the night passes quietly. The next day, the two versions of your life diverge. You'll only ever live one, but knowing the other might have existed makes the present feel fragile. You begin to sense the weight of each moment, how easily the shape of your life could shift. This awareness can become heavy if you let it. You might start to feel haunted by the paths you didn't take, as if you owe something to every version of yourself that never happened. But awareness can also bring calm. Knowing that every decision opens and closes a door helps you see that loss is built into living. You can't keep all the doors open. You can only walk through one at a time. Sometimes you get a glimpse of another version of your life by accident. A smell, a song, a street you haven't walked in years can pull you into a moment that feels like another lifetime. You see who you were before a choice changed everything. You might feel grief for that lost version or tenderness. That feeling is the mind's way of saying, I remember who else I could have been. Philosophers have written about this as the tension between freedom and fate. You're free to choose, but every choice eliminates infinite other freedoms. You can't live all possible lives. You can only live one. Yet the imagination keeps creating them. The mind builds small parallel worlds every day, versions of conversations, alternate outcomes, dreamlike rehearsals of lives that never happened. When you think about it this way, your mind becomes a multiverse in miniature. Every regret, fantasy, or dream holds a different you, waiting behind a thin wall of thought. They're not gone, they're simply unrealized. You can't meet them, but you can feel them. And in quiet moments, when life slows down enough, you might hear them breathing, the infinite versions of you, still waiting in the space between choices. You hold the door for someone, and they smile. You feel a small warmth rise in your chest. It's quiet, easy, and pleasant. You might call it kindness, but if you think too much about it, the question arrives, was that kindness for them or for you? You helped someone, but you also felt good doing it. If helping others makes you feel good, does that make it selfish? Most people learn early that kindness is a moral good. We're told to share, to care, to give without expecting anything in return. But nature doesn't always draw lines that cleanly. The brain rewards generous acts with small bursts of dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals that make us feel safe and satisfied. These rewards help society survive. They keep cooperation alive, but they also blur the boundary between altruism and self-interest. Imagine you see someone struggling to carry groceries across a street. You rush to help, you smile, they thank you, and you walk away lighter. You didn't do it for money or recognition, yet the act still gave you something, a feeling that you're a good person. That feeling reinforces the behavior. Next time, you're more likely to help again. On a biological level, kindness sustains itself because it benefits both giver and receiver. Psychologists call this the helper's high. Studies show that people who volunteer or give time to others often experience reduced stress and longer lifespans. Their immune systems improve. Their brains show patterns similar to those seen after exercise. The paradox here is clear. We call kindness selfless, but the self still profits from it. Does that mean no act of kindness is pure? That depends on how we define purity. Consider two people donating to charity. One gives because they want to ease someone's suffering. The other gives to feel less guilty about their own comfort. The results, the food, the medicine, the shelter, are the same. The motivation differs, but the outcome still helps. The world doesn't weigh intentions the way the mind does. Some philosophers have tried to separate selfless acts from selfish ones. Thomas Hobbes argued that all actions, even generous ones, come from self-interest. He believed that helping others always meets some personal need, to feel safe, respected, or valued. Others, like David Hume, thought compassion could exist for its own sake. He said we're capable of empathy without reward. Maybe both are right. Humans are complex enough to carry two motives at once. You can see this dual motive at work in everyday life. A teacher stays late to help a struggling student. Part of her wants to see the student succeed. Another part wants to feel useful, maybe even needed. A friend listens to your pain, not only because they care, but because it strengthens your bond. Even parenting, often described as the purest form of love, contains traces of reciprocity. A parent sacrifices sleep, time, and freedom, but gains purpose, affection, and identity in return. This doesn't make kindness fake. It makes it human. The same emotional system that drives compassion also drives connection. The self benefits because connection benefits survival. We evolved to feel good when we help others so that we would keep doing it. The system works best when we don't overthink it. But modern life invites reflection, and reflection complicates instinct. Think about public acts of generosity. Social media rewards giving that can be seen. Donations are shared, volunteer moments are photographed, hashtags track the kindness. The visibility makes good deeds spread faster, but it also feeds ego. The line between inspiring others and seeking validation becomes hard to see. You might wonder, if no one saw you do something kind, would it feel the same? Still, not all selfishness is bad. Motivation doesn't have to be pure to be valuable. If a small dose of self-interest encourages kindness, maybe that's something to accept, not reject. Helping others because it feels good is still helping. The feeling is part of the design. There's another angle to this paradox that's harder to face. Sometimes we give not because it feels good, but because it helps us escape feeling bad. You might offer help to avoid guilt, to manage anxiety, or to keep someone from disliking you. This kind of kindness is mixed with fear. It's a way to control how others see you. When giving becomes a performance, it can drain rather than heal. The act looks kind, but underneath, it's a form of protection. You can test your own motives by noticing what happens when kindness goes unnoticed. If you hold the door and no one says thank you, do you still feel good about it? If not, maybe you were chasing validation more than connection. This isn't a failure, it's just information. Awareness lets you see where your kindness comes from. The paradox doesn't mean you should stop helping. It means you can be honest about the exchange. Kindness isn't pure light or pure shadow. It's a trade between beings trying to exist together. You give time, energy, or care, and in return, you feel part of something larger than yourself. Even if the feeling benefits you, it also benefits the world that includes you. The loop completes itself. The truth might be simpler than the question. Kindness is both selfless and selfish, because self and other aren't as separate as we think. What helps one often helps both. The paradox fades when you see that helping others and feeling good about it are two sides of the same motion. Not a conflict, but a connection that keeps us alive. Imagine standing beside a river. The water moves around stones, bends with the current, and disappears downstream. Every drop that passes will never return. That's what memory is meant to be, a flow. Events happen, feelings rise and fade, and life continues. But sometimes, something refuses to move. A single moment lodges itself in the mind, like a stone in the current. The water still runs, but the stone stays, breaking the surface again and again. Memory isn't a perfect record. It's more like a living story that rewrites itself every time you remember it. Most memories soften at the edges as time moves on. The mind smooths them, dulls their sharpness, and lets them join the larger stream of experience. But when a moment won't fade, when it stays solid and heavy, it reshapes the current around it. Other thoughts flow differently because of it. The stone changes the river's path. Sometimes that stone is loss, someone leaves, or something ends. And your mind loops around the moment you realized it was over. You replay it because you want to understand, or undo it, or make peace with it. But each replay reinforces it. The brain doesn't know the difference between remembering and reliving. The same neural patterns light up in both. So the stone stays, polished by thought until it's too familiar to let go. You might notice this in quiet hours. You're washing dishes or lying in bed, and the same memory returns, not as a choice, but as an echo. Maybe it's something you said years ago in regret. Maybe it's a person's face frozen in a final moment. The scene replays with new edits each time. You tell yourself, I should be over this by now. But time doesn't heal what it can't carry away. Psychologists sometimes call this intrusive memory. It happens when the brain doesn't process an event completely. The emotional charge remains, waiting for release. Instead of storing the memory as a closed chapter, the mind keeps reopening it. The event becomes both past and present. It's finished and ongoing. The river moves, but the stone insists on being noticed. Memory has a practical reason for doing this. It replays painful experiences so you can learn from them, avoid danger, or find meaning. But not every experience has a clear lesson. Some moments hurt without reason. They stay because the mind can't file them anywhere else. You try to think your way through it, but the act of thinking feeds the loop. The mind becomes its own echo chamber. There's a small example in everyday life that shows how this works. Picture a conversation that went wrong. Maybe you said something awkward or unkind. Days later, you still think about it. You imagine different versions of what you could have said. You picture how the other person might have felt. Each version keeps the scene alive. It becomes a memory you can't stop editing. The stone doesn't erode, it grows smoother, heavier, more detailed with every thought. Trauma magnifies this process. When something overwhelms your sense of safety, the brain can't integrate it into the timeline of life. Instead of flowing downstream, the memory floats to the surface without warning. Smells, sounds, or images can trigger it. Time collapses. You feel as if the moment is happening again, even when you know it isn't. The river becomes unpredictable. Calm one second, flooded the next. People often think healing means forgetting, but that isn't quite right. You can't make the stone vanish. You can only let the river find a way to flow around it. Some therapies work this way, not by erasing memory, but by reconnecting it to context. By remembering safely, the brain learns that the danger has passed. The event joins the rest of the story instead of standing apart from it. There's another side to this too. Not all stones in memory are painful. Some are moments of joy that refuse to fade. A child's laughter, the sound of a loved one's voice, the smell of rain during a first kiss. They stay vivid long after other details dissolve. These memories anchor us, keeping identity stable when everything else changes. But even good memories can become heavy if we hold them too tightly. Nostalgia can trap the mind just as sorrow can. You start to live more in what was than in what is. Think about visiting your childhood home after many years. The rooms look smaller, the paint has changed, but your body remembers where every door leads. For a moment, time folds, and you feel like both the person you were and the person you are. The memory becomes real enough to touch. Then it fades again, leaving you between two selves, one that remembers, one that moves on. Memory gives life continuity, but it also resists change. It wants to preserve what mattered, even when that preservation hurts. The trick is not to force it to flow, but to notice when it's stuck. When a thought repeats for years, it's usually asking for something: recognition, forgiveness, release. The mind can't throw it away until it feels understood. Only then can the water loosen around it. The stone never disappears completely. It becomes part of the riverbed, shaping how the water sounds as it passes. Each ripple carries the trace of it. Maybe that's what remembering truly is, not holding the past still, but letting it stay beneath the surface, steady and silent, while the rest of life keeps moving downstream. There's a special kind of thought that never ends. It loops. You chase it for hours or years, but it never settles. You can't drop it, because dropping it feels like giving up on understanding something that matters. But it doesn't want to be solved. It only wants to be thought about. That's what the mind does best. It turns uncertainty into fuel. The human brain isn't comfortable with gaps. It needs answers. When something doesn't make sense, the mind fills the silence with guesses. That's useful when you're hunting for food, predicting danger, or fixing a broken machine. It's less useful when the question has no clear answer. The same system that helps us survive also makes us restless. You can see this in small ways. Someone ignores your message, and you start asking why. Were they busy, upset, bored? You replay the last conversation, looking for clues. None of the answers feel solid, but the brain doesn't stop. It keeps testing possibilities, as if certainty could erase the discomfort. The truth may never come, but thinking about it becomes its own habit. Philosophy is built on this tendency. For thousands of years, people have asked questions that no one can fully answer. What is consciousness? Why does anything exist? Do we have free will? Each generation of thinkers adds new words, but the questions remain. The pursuit gives structure to curiosity, even when the destination never changes. The mind likes motion more than resolution. Science, too, runs on unsolved questions. Every discovery opens another. When physicists find a new particle, it raises 3 more mysteries. The goalposts move, certainty recedes. The process never ends, because the drive to know never ends. It's as if the brain's main purpose isn't truth, but movement. To keep thinking, comparing, questioning, and building maps that can never be finished. This endless loop also shows up in ordinary life. You might wonder if you chose the right career, the right partner, the right path. You try to calculate the answer as if there's one hidden formula that could prove it. You think, if I can just be sure, I'll finally relax. But the moment one question settles, another rises. Did I make that decision for the right reason? Could I have done better? The brain doesn't want stillness. It wants the next problem. It's easy to confuse this cycle for meaning. If you're thinking deeply, you feel engaged, you feel alive. The mind rewards the act of inquiry itself. But over time, unsolvable questions can turn heavy. You might start to feel trapped by them, caught between wanting to understand and knowing you never will. That tension keeps the brain spinning. It's both its comfort and its cage. You can test this by trying to stop. Sit quietly and tell yourself to think about nothing. Within seconds, a question will appear. Am I doing this right? That's the brain's reflex. It wants to label, evaluate, and predict. Even in silence, it builds puzzles for itself. Some of the most common unsolvable questions are emotional. Why did they stop loving me? What if I'd said something different? What's wrong with me? These questions don't ask for information, they ask for peace. But the brain doesn't know how to deliver peace. It delivers more thoughts. The more you ask, the more paths it invents. It thinks it's helping, but it's really building a maze. There's a reason people find comfort in stories, religion, or philosophy. They don't just offer answers, they offer containers for the questions. A belief system gives the mind boundaries, a place to rest when logic can't go further. Even when 2 people believe opposite things, the relief they feel is the same. A pause in the noise of uncertainty. The internet makes the loop louder. When a question forms, you can search it instantly, but searching rarely ends the loop. It stretches it. Each answer links to another. Each opinion contradicts the last. You scroll for closure, but end up more unsettled. The mind is doing what it's wired to do, seek. But the supply of possible answers is now infinite. Children show the raw version of this drive. They ask why again and again, not to annoy, but because each answer opens a new hole to fill. Why is the sky blue? Leads to why does light scatter? Leads to why does light exist? At some point, adults stop asking, not because they've found peace, but because they've learned to live with mystery. The questions don't go away, they just move deeper inside. Even the question, who am I, works this way. You can describe yourself in hundreds of ways, by name, memory, belief, role, but each description leads to another layer. If you strip them all away, what's left? The brain can't resist trying to answer, but the more it looks, the less it finds. Awareness turns back on itself, searching for the observer. The question devours its own tail. Maybe the brain's need for these endless puzzles is part of what keeps it alive. The same loops that cause anxiety also create art, invention, and philosophy. Without them, the mind would drift into stillness, and stillness feels too much like ending. So it asks, and asks again. Some questions are made not to be solved, but to keep the mind moving, forever circling, forever curious, forever busy with the impossible. You wake up, and for a second, everything feels normal. The light through the window, the hum of traffic, the quiet pulse of being alive. Then the thought slips in, what if none of this is real? It's not a dramatic thought. It arrives quietly, like static under a song. You notice it, and suddenly the world around you feels thinner, as if something invisible has stepped between you and everything else. That feeling is the simulation ache, the strange hollow that appears when you question reality too deeply. It's not new. Philosophers have wondered for centuries whether life is an illusion. Plato wrote about a cave where shadows replaced truth. Descartes asked how we could be sure we weren't being tricked by our own senses. Today, the question wears modern clothes. We talk about computer simulations, digital consciousness, artificial intelligence. The core remains the same. What if everything we know is only a projection? The human brain relies on patterns to feel safe. It builds meaning from repetition. The same morning routine, the same street signs, the same faces. When you question the foundation beneath those patterns, something trembles. The mind begins to test the world like a scientist tapping glass to see if it cracks. You stare longer at reflections. You notice how light doesn't look quite right. You catch yourself wondering if people around you are real or just convincing actors in a massive design. This thought doesn't need to be true to change how you feel. Once you start doubting reality, reality starts to feel like doubt. You move through the day watching everything from a small distance, like an actor reading lines you didn't choose. The more you search for proof that the world is real, the less real it feels. There's a story about a student who once asked a monk how to tell if life was a dream. The monk said, "When you wake, the question will disappear. But for some people, it doesn't. The question lingers like a background hum. It's not curiosity anymore. It's disconnection. The ache comes from wanting to feel certain in a place where certainty isn't possible. Modern culture feeds this feeling. Virtual reality, video games, and digital avatars blur the line between the real and the made. You can build worlds that look and sound like life, but dissolve when the power cuts out. Spend enough time switching between screens, and it becomes easy to feel that the world itself might just be another level of simulation. The boundaries between self and signal blur. Psychologists sometimes call this derealization. It's when the world starts to feel distant or artificial, as if you're watching it through glass. It's not madness. It's the mind's way of coping with overload. When perception and thought fall out of sync, the brain protects itself by pulling you one step back. The world stays the same, but you stop feeling part of it. You might recognize the ache in small, everyday moments. You look up from your phone, and everything feels slightly staged. You speak to someone and hear your own voice as if it belongs to someone else. You drive home and can't remember the turns you took. only that you arrived. These experiences are normal, but when you start analyzing them, asking what's real and what isn't, they begin to multiply. The act of questioning creates the distance it's trying to close. The philosopher Nick Bostrom once suggested that if technology keeps advancing, simulated worlds could one day be indistinguishable from reality. His argument wasn't meant to disturb, but many people read it that way. The idea stuck because it speaks to something ancient in the human mind, the sense that life is both vivid and fragile, that it could vanish if you looked at it from the wrong angle. You can't reason your way out of that feeling. The more evidence you collect, physics, biology, math, the more the question slips through your fingers. Proof doesn't touch perception. The brain might know that the table is solid, but the ache lives in the space between knowledge and experience. It's the quiet discomfort of being conscious in a world that offers no final confirmation. Some people find comfort by turning the question around. If life were a simulation, it would still be the only one you get to live. The taste of food, the sound of laughter, the warmth of another hand, they all exist inside this framework, real or not. The ache doesn't change them. It only changes how close you feel to them. You can't stop the mind from wondering, but you can decide where you place your attention. The simulation ache isn't about proof, it's about presence. When you spend too long trying to see behind the curtain, you forget to look at the stage. The brain wants certainty, but life only offers participation. Every question you ask about what's real is also proof that you're here, alive enough to ask it. The ache doesn't mean life is fake. It means you're awake enough to feel the weight of not knowing. Every life is built from choices, but most of it is shaped by the ones you never made. You move in one direction, but the paths you didn't follow don't vanish. They stay close, running parallel, appearing in dreams, what-ifs, and sudden flashes of imagination. They're quiet, but they don't disappear. They walk beside you, like shadows of who you might have been. You make thousands of choices every day, most small, some large. What to wear, what to say, whether to stay, whether to leave. At the time, each decision feels like a step forward. You pick one thing, and the rest fades into the background. But the mind doesn't fully forget. It stores each unchosen option in a corner, tagged and waiting. Later, when life slows down, the brain replays them. It asks what would have happened if you turned left instead of right. You can see this in simple ways. You finish school and pick one job over another. Years later, you imagine how your life would look if you had chosen differently. Maybe you'd live in another city. Maybe you'd know different people. Maybe you'd be someone else entirely. The version of you who took the other path still exists in thought, not alive, but not gone either. A phantom choice leaves behind a phantom self. Psychologists sometimes call this counterfactual thinking, the habit of mentally rewriting history. It's the brain's way of exploring cause and effect, of learning from what didn't happen. Most of the time, it's harmless. It helps you plan better next time. But when a big decision carries regret or loss, those phantom choices can become heavy. They follow you for years, whispering that another version of life might have been better. There's a strange comfort in imagining those lives. They give shape to the idea that you could have been many things, but they can also become a trap. If you spend too long walking with your phantoms, you start to lose contact with the ground under your feet. You begin to compare your real life to an imagined one that never had to face reality. The mind edits those unchosen paths to perfection because they were never tested. The job you didn't take never went wrong. The relationship you didn't start never ended badly. The dream you didn't chase never failed. The unknown is clean because it never had to live. Memory plays a trick here. It lets you believe you could have seen every consequence ahead of time, but the truth is, you couldn't. Every choice closes one world and opens another. You can't live both. Even if you'd chosen differently, another set of phantom choices would have appeared. No life can escape them. They multiply with every decision. The older you get, the more of them you carry. You can feel this most clearly when life slows down. Late at night, when distractions fade, your mind begins to wander backward. You replay the arguments you could have avoided, the words you could have said, the moments when you might have stayed instead of leaving. You try to trace the line from those points to where you are now. The brain doesn't do this to punish you. It's trying to understand your story, to see how cause became effect. But sometimes it ends up hurting you instead. There's a kind of ache that comes from this awareness, not just regret, but curiosity. The imagination fills in the missing details of the unchosen life. It writes dialogue, scenery, outcomes. It builds a parallel existence so vivid you almost believe you can feel it breathing next to you. That's the danger of phantom choices. It can start to feel as real as the life you're living. You might notice this when you meet someone from your past. They mention what could have been, and for a moment, you see it too. The version of both of you that kept in touch, stayed close, built something together. The air between you carries the weight of the unreal. You part ways, but the echo stays. It's not sorrow exactly. It's recognition. You both know that every shared moment also created a fork that led somewhere you'll never see. The brain isn't built to live with infinite possibilities, yet it keeps imagining them. That's part of how it makes sense of loss. When something ends, the mind replays what could have continued. When something changes, it looks for the version that didn't. These thoughts aren't mistakes. They're proof that you care about what you've lived. They show the mind's wish to hold everything, even what never happened. Every choice creates two stories, the one that unfolds and the one that fades. You can't stop the shadow version from walking beside you. It's built into the way memory works, but you can notice it without following it too far. The phantom roads will always whisper, but they don't lead anywhere real. They're echoes of movement, reminders that every life, no matter how it unfolds, is made from both the steps we take and the ones we leave behind. Memory feels like travel, but it isn't. You think you can visit the past, step back into an old room, recall a face, replay a conversation, but you never return as the same person. What you remember isn't a doorway, it's a reflection. You see your former self behind glass, fixed in place, unaware that you're watching. You reach out to comfort them or to change what they did, but the glass doesn't move. That's the truth of time's mirror. It shows everything, but it lets you touch nothing. You might try this without meaning to. You think about a moment that still hurts, a mistake, a fight, a silence that lasted too long. You tell yourself, if only I had known better. You try to forgive yourself, but forgiveness requires understanding, and understanding lives in the present. The person who made that choice didn't have the knowledge you have now. They couldn't see through your eyes. They were doing their best inside a smaller version of your mind. You can judge them, but you can't become them again. The mind tries anyway. It rebuilds old scenes in perfect detail. The smell of a room, the sound of someone's voice, the way the light hit the wall. You replay the event, hoping to find a version that ends differently. But every replay adds distance. Each time you remember, you alter the memory a little. The brain doesn't store film. it stores interpretation. Every time you press play, you edit the script. The person you're watching becomes more like a character than a self. Sometimes this happens with good memories too. You look back on a happy moment, a summer afternoon, a first love, a simple day when you felt at ease, and you want to go back, not to change it, but to live it again. But even joy, when viewed through time's mirror, carries sadness. You realize you can't feel it the same way because you're no longer the same person who felt it. The memory is preserved, but the version of you that knew how to live inside it is gone. You can test this when you revisit a place from your past. You walk through your old school or an apartment you once called home. The details match your memory, but the feeling doesn't. The walls are smaller. The air smells different. You see the place clearly, but it doesn't see you back. It belongs to a different version of you. The mirror holds their image, not yours. This gap between who you were and who you are now can create guilt. You look at your younger self and see flaws you want to fix. Ignorance, carelessness, the inability to say the right words. You tell yourself you'd do better now. Maybe you would, but that's not a fair comparison. Growth always changes the judge. The older mind critiques the younger one, using standards that didn't exist then. You can't hold your past self to your present wisdom. There's a reason therapy often focuses on self-compassion rather than self-correction. You can't rewrite your past, but you can stop punishing it. The goal isn't to approve of everything you once did, but to see it in context, to understand that you were acting with the tools and understanding you had. The person who made that mistake no longer exists, except as memory. You can grieve for them, but you can't replace them. Sometimes people think forgiveness means erasing the event, but that's not possible either. The brain can't delete memories. It can only soften their edges. What you're really doing when you forgive is loosening your grip. You're letting the reflection stay in the mirror instead of trying to pull it into the present. You're saying, "That was me once. I see them. They can stay there." There's a kind of peace in recognizing that the self is always moving forward. Each day, you shed small versions of yourself, thoughts, habits, fears, the way a river sheds droplets while still flowing. You can look back and see every form you've taken, but you can't stand in that same water again. The current won't allow it. People often say, "I wish I could go back and tell my younger self something." But even if you could, they wouldn't hear you. You'd be speaking a language they hadn't learned yet. The insight you have now only exists because of what they lived through. You can't save them without erasing yourself. The mirror of time never lies, but it never opens. It reflects every version of you, the child, the dreamer, the fool, the survivor, all standing in a line behind you. You can see them as clearly as faces in glass, but they can't turn around. You can forgive them, but you can't join them. The act of forgiveness happens here, in the present, spoken by the person they helped you become. You say "I" 100 times a day. I'm tired. I think. I want. The word feels solid, like it points to a single person inside your head, a center that sees, decides, and continues unchanged. But when you start looking for it, the "I" begins to disappear. You can find thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations, but not the thing that's supposed to own them. You find experience, not an owner. That's the observer illusion. The quiet assumption that there's someone behind the eyes watching everything happen. The illusion is powerful because it's useful. The brain needs a narrator to keep life organized. It collects signals from the senses, links them to memories, and strings them together into a single story. That story is what you call me. It's not false, it's functional. Without it, you'd lose track of your identity from one moment to the next. But the observer isn't a physical thing. It's a pattern your brain builds to make sense of experience. You can see this if you sit still and try to find the observer directly. You close your eyes and think, who's noticing this breath? A voice in your head says, I am. Then you notice that voice too. You realize it's another thought, another sound passing through. You try to go deeper, but each you find turns out to be something you can observe. There's always another layer, the one who sees, and the one who sees, the one who sees. The search never lands because the watcher keeps turning into what's being watched. This isn't just philosophy. Neuroscience hints at the same thing. There's no single region in the brain that houses the self. What we call I is a network, parts for memory, attention, emotion, and decision-making working together. When one of those systems changes, the sense of self changes too. Patients with certain brain injuries sometimes report feeling detached from their bodies or unsure if their thoughts belong to them. Their experiences show that identity is fragile, built from coordination, not from a single source. You've probably felt small glimpses of this fragility. You're driving on a familiar road and realize you've been on autopilot. The car moved, the mind wandered, and for a few seconds, there was no clear you controlling anything. Or you get lost in a movie, and for a while you forget yourself completely. Then something breaks your attention, and the self returns like a hand snapping back to the wheel. The observer was gone, and then it was back, as if it had been waiting off stage. Meditation exposes this even more clearly. At first, it feels like you're the one watching thoughts pass by, but after a while, you see that thoughts appear on their own. Feelings appear on their own. Even the effort to pay attention happens on its own. The sense of being an observer turns into another experience among experiences. It doesn't control the show, it's part of it. Philosophers have struggled with this for centuries. David Hume wrote that when he looked inward, he never found a self, only a stream of sensations. The Buddha said the same thing long before that. The self is a process, not a person. Modern cognitive science calls it the self model, a simulation the brain runs to predict behavior and maintain coherence. In other words, the observer isn't the one watching the film, it's part of the projection. This might sound abstract, but it affects everyday life. Most of the suffering we feel comes from identifying too tightly with the observer. You think, I'm anxious, instead of anxiety is present. The first version turns the emotion into identity. The second treats it as an event that will pass. The illusion of a fixed self makes every feeling feel permanent, every thought feel personal. When you loosen that illusion, you start to see emotions for what they are, movements of mind, not marks of who you are. Think about how you experience embarrassment. You remember something awkward you did years ago, and your body reacts as if it's happening now. Your stomach tightens, your face warms. You feel watched, but by who? There's no one else in the room. The observer inside your head has taken on the role of an audience. It plays both the actor and the critic. That's the trap. You live inside a story narrated by a voice that pretends to stand outside of it. Language reinforces this split. Sentences need subjects. Every verb demands an I to perform it. You can't easily say, thinking is happening, even though that's closer to the truth. You say, I'm thinking. The grammar builds the illusion that thought belongs to a thinker. But the brain doesn't think because someone orders it to. It thinks because that's what it does. Like the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the mind thinks. The observer steps in afterward and claims ownership. You can catch this moment if you pay attention. A thought appears. I need to call them back. Who made it appear? You didn't decide to think it. It just showed up. The same goes for most impulses, memories, and feelings. They arise from networks of neurons and experiences. Then the observer voice says, "I thought that." It's not lying. It's just doing its job, stitching cause and effect into a single continuous identity. This illusion isn't a mistake. It's part of how consciousness works. It gives you stability in a world that never stops changing. The problem starts when you forget it's an illusion. When you take the observer too seriously, you start living for its approval, trying to perfect the story it tells about who you are. You feel watched all the time, not by others, but by yourself. You can't stop the observer from existing, but you can see through it. The moment you realize that the watcher is also being watched, the illusion softens. The I doesn't disappear. It just becomes lighter, quieter. You start to move through life less as a fixed person and more as a series of moments unfolding. You still say I, but it no longer feels like a wall between you and the world. It feels like a window, clear, transparent, open to whatever appears next. There's a question that sounds simple but cuts deep when you sit with it. If knowing the truth made you unhappy, would you still want to know it? Or would you rather live in calm ignorance, not blissful but unbothered? It's an old question dressed in new language, and it divides people quietly. Some say truth is worth any cost. Others think peace matters more. Both answers say something about how we live with uncertainty. Truth is heavy because it doesn't care how it feels. It shows what is, not what you wish for. You might find comfort in honesty, but not always happiness. Imagine a relationship built on trust. One day, you discover a lie, not large, but enough to change how you see the other person. You can't unknow it. The bond feels different. The air between you changes. The truth has done its job. It revealed what was hidden. But now the peace that once existed is gone. The same thing happens on a smaller scale every day. You check the news and learn something dark about the world. You open an old memory and find pain you forgot. You reflect on your choices and see patterns that hurt to admit. Each truth sharpens awareness, but awareness can ache. The mind wants to know, but the heart wants to rest. Philosophers have argued about this for centuries. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. He believed that ignorance may protect you, but it also limits you. Yet others, like Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, imagined a society where truth was too costly. People were content because they didn't know enough to question. They were peaceful but shallow. It raises the uncomfortable idea that maybe knowledge and happiness aren't meant to live in the same room for long. You can see this trade-off in everyday life. Think about the moment you realize a comforting belief isn't true. Maybe you grew up with faith in something, an idea, a system, a person, and later saw its flaws. The loss doesn't just change your opinion, it changes how safe the world feels. You become more realistic, but you also lose a kind of innocence. The truth matures you, but it also removes shelter. The brain, for its part, doesn't always prefer truth. It prefers stability. When faced with information that threatens comfort, it often resists. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the tension between what we know and what we want to believe. When the two don't match, the mind tries to close the gap, often by bending the truth. It tells small lies to protect the larger story that keeps us balanced. That's why denial feels easier than honesty. It's the brain's version of self-defense. There's a study that illustrates this. Participants were asked if they wanted to know the exact date of their death. Most said no. They preferred uncertainty over knowledge that would make them anxious. When asked if they'd want to know the outcome of a future relationship before it began, many refused again. They wanted to live the experience, even if it ended in pain. These answers show something deep. People don't always value truth for truth's sake. They value the shape of their emotional world more. The question becomes sharper when applied to self-awareness. Imagine discovering that your good intentions sometimes cause harm, or that your kindness hides a need for approval. That kind of truth doesn't destroy your life, but it unsettles it. You see yourself more clearly, but you also lose the comfort of a simpler story. Growth often begins where peace ends, and the cost of understanding is rarely cheap. Still, the opposite is also true. Peace without truth can hollow you out. Pretending not to know what you already sense creates friction inside. You smile while something inside tightens. You avoid certain thoughts, not because they're unimportant, but because they threaten the balance you've built. That's when peace becomes numbness, quiet on the surface, but restless underneath. Movies and stories explore this trade often. In The Matrix, the character Cypher wishes he could go back to ignorance, saying ignorance is bliss. He wants the comfort of illusion, even if it means giving up freedom. It's easy to judge him, but his desire isn't foreign. Most people have moments where they'd rather not know, when truth feels like opening a door that won't close again. Even in personal relationships, this choice appears in small ways. Do you ask the hard question that might change everything, or stay silent to preserve what you have? Do you tell someone what you really think, or protect them and yourself from discomfort? Every time you choose honesty, you risk losing ease. Every time you choose silence, you trade clarity for calm. It's tempting to think of truth and peace as opposites, but they're not. They overlap for a while before drifting apart. Truth clears the fog, and sometimes that clarity brings relief. You stop guessing, you stop pretending. But when truth exposes something painful, a betrayal, a failure, a loss, peace steps aside for a time. A mind must rebuild itself around what it knows. You can watch this happen inside yourself after any major realization. At first, the truth feels sharp, a flash that burns away illusion. Then it cools. Over time, the sting fades, and something steadier replaces it. Understanding. You might not feel happy, but you feel grounded. That's a different kind of peace, not the soft comfort of not knowing, but the quiet strength of seeing clearly and staying anyway. The happiness swap is never simple. Sometimes you pick truth and lose ease. Other times you choose peace and lose depth. Both are human. Both are temporary. The mind will always look for balance between what it can bear to know and what it needs to believe. Truth may cost peace for a while, but peace built on denial costs truth forever. The weight you choose depends on what kind of life you're willing to carry. You think, I am thinking. The sentence feels true. It feels like you're the one directing the thought, choosing it, shaping it. But if you stop and ask what part of you actually does the thinking, the answer gets blurry. The brain handles it clearly, but the brain isn't something you control. You don't decide which neuron fires or what chain of electrical and chemical reactions follows. The thought just appears, and then you take credit for it. That's the strange truth at the heart of consciousness. The machine generates the experience, but the experience thinks it's in charge. Every feeling, memory, and idea comes from patterns of activity inside the brain. When you see a color, billions of neurons in your visual cortex translate light into perception. When you feel joy, chemicals like dopamine and serotonin adjust how signals move through the network. When you decide to raise your hand, motor regions send instructions down your spine before you even finish the thought, "I will raise my hand." Neuroscientists can sometimes predict your decision before you consciously know you've made it. That discovery doesn't make the self vanish, but it complicates it. You can test this easily. Think of a word right now. Maybe you choose tree. You can explain why afterward. Maybe you saw one earlier. Maybe you picked it at random. But the instant the word appeared, it came unbidden. The decision to think of tree wasn't a conscious command. It was a result. Your brain produced it, then your mind stepped in to explain it. The sequence feels reversed because consciousness is like a narrator arriving late to the scene, describing what already happened. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Descartes thought the self was something separate from the body, a soul that used the brain as an instrument. Modern science doesn't find that separation. When the brain changes, so does the mind. Damage one part, and language disappears. Damage another, and personality shifts. Consciousness seems less like a driver inside the machine, and more like the glow the machine produces when it's running. This doesn't mean consciousness isn't real. It means it's emergent, something that arises when enough smaller processes interact. Like how wetness isn't found in a single molecule of water, but in the behavior of many together. Awareness comes from countless unconscious steps working in harmony. You can't point to one neuron and say, "That's where I am." You exist in the pattern itself, the whole dance of activity across the brain. Still, there's a puzzle here. If thoughts arise automatically, where does free will fit? You feel like you choose, but what if choice is just the final stage of computation? The brain weighs options, predicts outcomes, and delivers a conclusion. You then experience that conclusion as a decision. Free will might not mean control over every process, but the ability to reflect and respond after awareness arrives. The you that acts is the system noticing itself. Consider how this plays out in emotion. Anger flares before you choose it. Grief surfaces without permission. The feeling appears, then you decide how to respond. You might breathe, speak, or withdraw. The choice happens after the spark. In that sense, consciousness is a feedback loop. It doesn't start the process, but it influences what happens next. You're both the product and the editor of the brain's ongoing work. Some thinkers compare the mind to a movie playing in an empty theater. The film is the brain's activity, and consciousness is the light that makes it visible. There's no viewer separate from the projection, only the illusion of one created by attention. When you say I, you're naming the spotlight, not the stage. The story feels centered because your attention can only track one small part of the movie at a time. Modern neuroscience adds another layer. Brain scans show that conscious awareness uses only a fraction of neural processing. Most of what your brain does happens outside awareness, regulating heartbeat, filtering sounds, storing memories, predicting movement. If you had to consciously manage all of it, you'd never get through a single second. The unconscious machinery runs the world, and consciousness steps in only for decisions that require flexible thinking. This might sound unsettling, like discovering you're a passenger inside your own head, but it can also feel freeing. If thoughts and emotions arise from the same automatic system that keeps you breathing, you can stop blaming yourself for every passing idea. Not every thought is a command. It's just activity, part of the system doing what it does. The you that notices is another part of the same system, learning to coexist with the noise. Imagine a pianist playing a piece so familiar that their hands move without effort. The music flows. They don't think about each note. They simply experience the motion. That's the balance the brain strikes between machinery and awareness. Most of life runs automatically. Consciousness steps in when something breaks rhythm. When you make a mistake, face a new problem, or sense danger, awareness isn't constant control. It's the brain's emergency light, a signal saying, "Pay attention." Some researchers now study artificial intelligence to better understand this link. Machines can process data, recognize patterns, and make predictions, but they don't seem to experience anything. They compute without presence. That difference between processing and awareness is what makes consciousness mysterious. It's not that the brain works like a computer. It's that out of its complexity comes the feeling of being alive. The code thinks it's a person. When you realize that, the question changes. It's no longer, where am I in the brain, but what does it mean to be the pattern that's thinking? The self isn't located anywhere because it isn't a place. It's the process of awareness unfolding in time, thought watching itself happen, machinery conscious of its own motion. You're not inside the brain. You're what the brain does when it looks at itself and says, "I am." Empathy is what keeps people connected. It's the quiet bridge between one mind and another. The ability to sense what someone else feels, to step into their experience for a moment. Most of the time, it helps us care. It softens judgment and builds understanding. But when that bridge never closes, when you spend too long on the other side, empathy can stop connecting and start consuming. Feeling others too deeply can make you lose track of where they end and you begin. That's the empathy burn, the exhaustion that comes from carrying emotions that aren't yours. It starts small. You notice someone's sadness and feel a tug in your chest. You want to help, so you listen. But as they speak, their feelings move into you. You start to feel the same weight they do, not as sympathy, but as if it's happening to you too. You leave the conversation drained, unsure why. It's not that their pain rubbed off on you. It's that your mind treated their pain as your own. The line between witness and participant blurred. The brain makes this possible through mirror neurons, cells that fire both when you act and when you see someone else act. If you watch someone get hurt, the same regions in your brain activate as if you were hurt yourself. That's why empathy feels physical. You don't just imagine another's experience, your body simulates it. But that system wasn't designed for endless exposure. When it never shuts off, it overwhelms the nervous system. You start absorbing too much: sorrow from a friend, fear from the news, tension from a stranger's tone. It builds quietly until it feels like static under your skin. People in caregiving roles know this well. Nurses, therapists, teachers, and parents often live inside a constant hum of other people's emotions. They can't turn it off because empathy is part of their job. Yet after years of doing it, many describe a strange numbness. They still care, but they feel emptied out. This isn't lack of compassion, it's compassion fatigue. The mind protects itself by dulling the feeling that once kept it connected. The burn flips into frost. Empathy burn also hides in personal relationships. You might have a friend or partner whose moods shift quickly, and without meaning to, you shift with them. They're anxious, so you become anxious. They're angry, so you tense. You spend hours trying to fix what they feel because you can't stand to feel it too. After a while, you stop knowing what's yours and what's theirs. You don't just lose energy, you lose boundaries. There's a quiet danger in being too open. when you make space for everyone else's emotions, your own have nowhere to live. You become a mirror that only reflects, never rests. Some people mistake this for kindness, but it isn't sustainable. Empathy without separation isn't compassion, it's collapse. Imagine an actor who never leaves character. They live every role as if it's real, the grief, the fear, the heartbreak. Eventually, they forget who they are outside the script. That's what unchecked empathy feels like. It's not performance, but immersion. You don't just understand others, you inhabit them. And when you live inside too many borrowed emotions, your own start to fade. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional contagion. Feelings spread between people the way yawns do, unconsciously, automatically. It's part of what makes social life possible, but it also means that emotional boundaries aren't fixed. The brain synchronizes with the people around it. Their stress raises your heart rate. Their sadness changes your tone of voice. If you're sensitive to those cues, you might end up living in other people's weather systems. There's another layer to the empathy burn: guilt. When you notice someone's pain, you might feel responsible for easing it. You think, if I don't help, I'm selfish. But empathy isn't control. You can understand someone's suffering without fixing it. Trying to take it away often backfires. It leaves both people drained, one still hurting, the other depleted. Real empathy isn't carrying someone's load, it's walking beside them long enough for them to remember they can carry it themselves. You can see this difference in how people respond to others' distress. The first reaction, empathic distress, feels like drowning. You're flooded with another person's pain, and the only relief is to escape or shut down. The second, compassionate empathy, feels grounded. You sense their pain, but stay steady enough to help. The shift is small, but crucial. It depends on awareness, noticing the emotion without being swallowed by it. The empathy burn often creeps in when you forget that distance doesn't mean indifference. It's easy to think that caring deeply means merging completely, but the healthiest empathy holds space, not weight. It watches with open eyes, not open wounds. Some people learn this the hard way. After years of emotional overextension, they withdraw completely, mistaking numbness for safety. They stop feeling others to protect what's left of themselves. But cutting empathy off isn't healing, it's retreat. The real skill is staying connected without losing shape. One way to test if you're burning out is to notice what happens after helping someone. If you feel calm and present, your empathy is balanced. If you feel heavy, resentful, or invisible, it's leaking. The goal isn't to feel less, but to feel with perspective, to know that other people's feelings pass through you, not into you. Empathy is one of the brain's finest tricks, a simulation so vivid it feels real. But like any simulation, it needs limits. Too much exposure blurs selfhood. You start living as everyone's echo. The empathy burn doesn't happen because you care too much. It happens because you forget that you're allowed to stay whole while caring. To feel deeply is human. To remain yourself while doing it, that's the art of surviving your own compassion. You think of memory as a recording, a file stored in your head, waiting to be played back. You trust it because it feels vivid. You can see the faces, hear the words, smell the air of the moment. It feels like truth. But memory isn't a recording, it's reconstruction. Each time you remember something, your brain rebuilds the event from fragments, guesses, and emotional traces. And every rebuild changes it slightly. What you recall isn't the past, it's your last memory of remembering it. The story shifts every time you tell it, even if you're telling it only to yourself. Neuroscience shows that recalling a memory pulls it out of storage and makes it flexible again. The process is called reconsolidation, While the memory is active, new details, moods, and interpretations can slip in. When it's stored again, it carries those changes forward. Over time, these small edits pile up until the original moment is gone. What remains is the version you've reimagined, polished or distorted through repetition. The brain means no harm, it's just doing its job of making meaning. But in the process, truth gets rewritten. Think of a childhood memory. Maybe you see yourself at a birthday party. You can picture the cake, the candles, the sound of people singing. But if you asked everyone who was there, their memories would differ. Someone might remember a different song. Another might say the cake was blue instead of white. Each of you is certain, but certainty doesn't equal accuracy. Memory is personal storytelling, not factual recording. The mind values coherence over correctness. You can see how this works in daily life. You argue with someone about what was said in a conversation last week. You both feel sure. Each of you recalls the tone, the phrasing, even the look on the other's face. But your memories can't both be true in full. You remember what the moment meant to you, and that meaning shapes what details survive. The brain filters events through emotion. Anger sharpens some edges, affection softens others. Over time, what you felt becomes what you remember. The most striking proof of this comes from studies on eyewitness testimony. People who witness the same event often describe completely different versions. They're not lying. Their minds are editing in real time. If they discuss the event afterward, their stories start to align, not because they found the truth, but because shared retelling merges their memories. The group forms a collective version that feels stable but isn't accurate. Memory is social, and that makes it even more unreliable. Even photos don't save us from this problem. When you look at an old picture, you think you're verifying the past, but you're actually rewriting it again. The image triggers associations, emotions, and commentary. You might remember how you felt rather than what actually happened. If you look often enough, the photo becomes the memory. You forget the moments before and after it. The still image replaces the moving story. This flexibility isn't a flaw, it's an adaptation. The brain edits memories to keep your story coherent. It updates them to fit who you are now. That's why you might remember a hard period of your life with more understanding than pain years later. The facts didn't change, your relationship to them did. The mind reshapes the memory to match your current self. In that way, memory keeps identity continuous, even as it quietly rewrites the record. But this same process can make you doubt yourself. When you recall something important, a betrayal, a loss, a success, and later realize you think of memory as a recording, a file stored in your head, waiting to be played back. You trust it because it feels vivid. You can see the faces, hear the words, smell the air of the moment. It feels like truth. But memory isn't a recording, it's reconstruction. Each time you remember something, your brain rebuilds the event from fragments, guesses, and emotional traces. And every rebuild changes it slightly. What you recall isn't the past, it's your last memory of remembering it. The story shifts every time you tell it, even if you're telling it only to yourself. Neuroscience shows that recalling a memory pulls it out of storage and makes it flexible again. The process is called reconsolidation. While the memory is active, new details, moods, and interpretations can slip in. When it's stored again, it carries those changes forward. Over time, these small edits pile up until the original moment is gone. What remains is the version you've reimagined, polished or distorted through repetition. The brain means no harm, it's just doing its job of making meaning. But in the process, truth gets rewritten. Think of a childhood memory. Maybe you see yourself at a birthday party. You can picture the cake, the candles, the sound of people singing. But if you asked everyone who was there, their memories would differ. Someone might remember a different song. Another might say the cake was blue instead of white. Each of you is certain, but certainty doesn't equal accuracy. Memory is personal storytelling, not factual recording. The mind values coherence over correctness. You can see how this works in daily life. You argue with someone about what was said in a conversation last week. You both feel sure. Each of you recalls the tone, the phrasing, even the look on the other's face. But your memories can't both be true in full. You remember what the moment meant to you, and that meaning shapes what details survive. The brain filters events through emotion. Anger sharpens some edges, affection softens others. Over time, what you felt becomes what you remember. The most striking proof of this comes from studies on eyewitness testimony. People who witness the same event often describe completely different versions. They're not lying. Their minds are editing in real time. If they discuss the event afterward, their stories start to align. Not because curiosity begins as a spark. You notice something and want to understand it. You ask why, and the question opens a door. But if you keep asking, if you pull apart every answer to find what lies beneath it, the meaning that once gave you comfort can start to dissolve. The very act of analysis wears it down, like water carving stone. What began as a search for depth becomes erosion, not of truth, but of significance. The human mind is built to seek reasons. It looks for order in chaos, cause in coincidence. That instinct is what built science, philosophy, and art. But meaning is fragile. It depends on belief and emotion as much as logic. Every why takes you a layer deeper, and each layer removes a little more warmth from the thing you're studying. At some point, the answers stop feeling like understanding and start feeling like distance. You can feel this most clearly with love. At first, it's simple. You love someone because you do. It feels immediate, self-evident. But then the mind starts asking questions. Why them? Why now? Is it biology? Is it memory? Is it need? The more you analyze, the more mechanical it becomes. Hormones, attachment patterns, evolutionary incentives. The explanation starts to sound like a dissection, not a feeling. You find reasons for everything except the part that made it beautiful. The connection still exists, but it feels thinner, as if too much light has been let in. This happens in faith too. A person might believe in something larger, a God, a moral order, a purpose to life. The belief gives them stability. Then one day, they begin to ask why. Why does suffering exist? Why do good things end? Why is meaning unevenly distributed? Each question digs at the foundation. The structure doesn't collapse all at once. It wears away. The logic of the questions is sound, but the emotional scaffolding that once held belief in place begins to crack. Eventually, what remains is not clarity, but emptiness. A sense that everything can be explained, but nothing feels alive. Philosophers have wrestled with this problem for centuries. Nietzsche called it the death of God, not as a statement about religion, but about meaning itself. Once you reduce everything to explanation, the world loses its mystery. It still functions, but it doesn't sing. Camus saw the same thing in The Absurd, the clash between our need for purpose and the universe's indifference. The more clearly you see that clash, the harder it becomes to pretend there's an answer waiting. You start to understand everything except the reason to care about it. In everyday life, this erosion shows up quietly. You might start a hobby that brings you joy: painting, gardening, playing guitar. At first, you lose yourself in it. Then you begin to ask why it matters. What's the point? What do I gain from this? You analyze your own enjoyment until it feels shallow. The moment you start measuring the value of pleasure, the pleasure fades. The activity hasn't changed. Your relationship to it has. Meaning relies on a kind of innocence, and too much reflection strips that away. Even in small interactions, the same pattern appears. A child laughs at a simple trick, pure and absorbed. An adult watches and thinks about the physics of the motion, the psychology of humor, the social role of play. The knowledge isn't wrong, but it dulls the immediacy. The more you understand something from the outside, the harder it is to feel it from the inside. The brain plays a part in this too. When something becomes familiar, the neural reward fades. It's called hedonic adaptation. The first time you understand something new, it releases dopamine, the chemical of anticipation and reward. But once you've understood it, the brain stops rewarding it. Asking why again reactivates the system for a while, but only if it leads to wonder. If it only leads to more questions, the reward shuts off. What's left is thought without feeling, a cognitive loop without satisfaction. There's a scene that captures this well. A person stands under a night sky. The stars fill them with awe. Then they remember what they've learned. The stars are balls of gas. The light is billions of years old. The universe is indifferent. The facts are true, and they are magnificent in their own way, but they also flatten the intimacy of the moment. The mystery that once stirred the heart now sits inside a framework of data. You can admire it, but you no longer feel part of it. Meaning needs mystery the way a flame needs oxygen. When you remove too much of it, the flame goes out. That doesn't mean ignorance is better. It means understanding has limits. There's a difference between knowing about something and being within it. The first gives control, the second gives connection. Asking why pulls you toward the first, and sometimes that shift costs you the second. You can see this in relationships, art, even self-reflection. You start asking why you are the way you are, what shaped you, what drives you. The answers help for a while. They bring awareness, maybe even healing. But if you keep going, you reach a point where every thought is deconstructed. You no longer feel like a person, just a network of causes. You lose the story that made you coherent. Meaning erodes when curiosity loses its balance. The same question that deepens understanding can also dissolve it if pushed too far. The secret isn't to stop asking why, it's to know when to stop digging. Some truths are meant to be lived, not dissected. When you look too closely at the thread that holds your world together, you may find that pulling on it unravels the whole cloth. Relaxation seems simple. You stop working, find a quiet space, and tell yourself to unwind. But the moment you try to relax, something tightens. You notice your breathing, your posture, the weight in your chest. You tell yourself to calm down, but every reminder proves that you aren't calm yet. The more you aim for stillness, the further it drifts. That's the paradox of effort. The harder you try to let go, the less you can. This happens because relaxation is a state, not a task. It comes when control eases, not when it intensifies. But the human mind is built around control. We reach goals by effort, repetition, and discipline. So when faced with something that can't be forced, like peace, sleep, or joy, we instinctively apply the same method that works everywhere else. We chase calm the way we chase success, and it fails for the same reason chasing sleep keeps you awake. You can feel this when you lie in bed after a long day. You turn off the light and tell yourself, I need to fall asleep now. The thought feels harmless, but it's already work. You start listening for signs of rest, a yawn, a slowing heartbeat, and the very act of listening keeps you alert. The part of the brain that monitors progress doesn't shut down. It scans for results. Each second of wakefulness becomes proof that you're failing. The same pattern plays out with relaxation. You turn inward to measure peace, and by doing so, you interrupt it. The paradox extends beyond rest. Athletes experience it when they tense up before a performance. Musicians feel it when they overthink technique and lose rhythm. In both cases, effort becomes interference. Flow, the state of effortless engagement, disappears when attention moves from the act to the self performing it. Psychologists call this self-monitoring. It's useful for learning new skills, but destructive for mastery. Once you start observing every movement, you can't move naturally anymore. Trying to relax works the same way. You might meditate, but instead of noticing the breath, you start judging it. You wonder if you're doing it right, if your thoughts are too loud, if your posture looks like the ones in pictures. You turn a practice of release into another performance. The moment meditation becomes a goal, it stops being meditation. This isn't a flaw in willpower, it's how consciousness functions. Awareness evolved it to solve problems. When you direct it at something, it sharpens, divides, measures. But relaxation is the absence of division. It's the body and mind syncing without commentary. The system can't evaluate itself and be at ease at the same time. The observer can't disappear by observing harder. There's a simple experiment that shows this clearly. Try to keep your hand perfectly still for a full minute. The more you focus, the more it trembles. Micro adjustments creep in, and soon your fingers twitch. Control generates instability, but if you forget about the hand, if your attention drifts, it steadies. The same applies to your inner life. Stillness arises when you stop trying to engineer it. Some spiritual teachers describe this through the idea of non-striving. They compare the mind to muddy water. The harder you stir to make it clear, the cloudier it becomes. Clarity appears only when you stop stirring. Modern psychology calls this paradoxical intention, the use of deliberate non-effort to break a feedback loop. For example, people with insomnia are sometimes told to try to stay awake. The reversal removes pressure and sleep comes naturally. The same principle applies to anxiety, focus, and rest. The cure for trying too hard is often to stop trying at all. The challenge is that stopping effort feels like giving up. We're trained to believe that ease is earned, not found. Even relaxation becomes something to schedule, optimize, and track. You download an app, follow breathing timers, and check your progress at being calm. The tools themselves create tension. They turn peace into performance. You end up exhausted from the effort of unwinding. You can see this mindset in modern work culture. People treat rest as recovery, a pit stop before returning to productivity. They meditate to improve focus, not to experience stillness. They take vacations but fill them with tasks designed to prove they rested well. The act of recharging becomes another form of work. When you measure relaxation in outcomes, it stops being relaxation and becomes output. Children show the opposite. Watch a child lying in the grass, staring at clouds. They aren't trying to be mindful. They aren't practicing stillness. They're simply present. Their awareness hasn't split into watcher and watched. The state we chase through technique is one they fall into by nature. The difference isn't age, it's absence of effort. That doesn't mean relaxation should be left entirely to chance. Practices like meditation, breathing exercises, or yoga create conditions where release can happen, but they work only when done without fixation on results. The breath isn't a lever, it's an anchor. The body's movements aren't commands. They're invitations. You don't make peace happen, you make space for it to arrive. The paradox of effort shows up even in emotional healing. You try to force forgiveness, to demand closure, to will yourself into calm. But emotions don't respond to commands. They unfold when conditions allow. Forcing serenity only deepens unrest. Sometimes, not trying is the most disciplined act of all, a kind of surrender that isn't defeat, but trust. Trying to relax ruins the attempt because the attempt itself is tension. Every thought that says, "I should be calmer," adds another layer of strain. The solution hides in reversal, noticing without fixing, allowing without directing. Peace isn't built by effort, it's revealed when effort stops. The mind's grip loosens, the muscles soften, and without realizing when it happened, you've fallen into the very state you were chasing all along. You wake from a dream that shouldn't matter. No one died. Nothing real happened. But the feeling sits heavy, a sadness or shame that won't fade even after you open your eyes. You remind yourself it wasn't real, yet your body doesn't listen. Your heart rate stays high. Your chest stays tight. The pain from the dream clings like static. That's dream residue, the echo of an unreal experience that feels real enough to leave a mark. The brain doesn't draw a sharp line between imagined and lived events. During sleep, it runs simulations using the same circuits it uses when awake. The parts of the brain that handle emotion, movement, and memory light up as if what's happening is real. The rational center, the prefrontal cortex, quiets down, leaving emotion to run without restraint. So when you wake from a nightmare, your body has already reacted. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline have flooded your system. You didn't imagine fear, you experienced it. The mind knows it was a dream, but the body remembers something real. That mismatch creates confusion. You sit on the edge of the bed, caught between two truths. Nothing happened, and something did. The dream fades, but the mood stays. You carry it through the morning without knowing why you're uneasy. A logic that usually cleans up your feelings can't reach this one because it has no real source to fix. Dream residue lingers precisely because it has no outlet. It happens with sadness too. You dream of losing someone, and even after you wake, grief hangs in the air. The person might be fine, yet for a moment you look at them differently, with a tenderness that doesn't quite make sense. The mind has rehearsed the loss and left you with its emotional aftertaste. In that way, dreams sometimes prepare you for real pain before it arrives. They test your emotional endurance in the dark. The brain uses dreams for this kind of rehearsal. Psychologists call it emotional regulation. Dreams allow the brain to revisit unresolved feelings in a safe, internal space. You might dream of arguments that never happened or fears you never voiced. The experience feels raw because the brain treats it as practice, a way to process emotions it couldn't handle while awake. That's why some dreams relieve tension while others create it. The difference depends on whether the simulation helps or reopens a wound. Nightmares often sit at the edge of this balance. They're the mind's attempt to make sense of fear through repetition. But when the emotion is too strong, the rehearsal fails and becomes trauma in miniature. Veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder experience this most clearly. Their dreams replay events so vividly that the body reacts as if it's happening again. Sweating, shaking, gasping. The brain is trying to file the memory away, but keeps getting caught on the pain. Even after waking, the residue feels like real damage. You don't have to experience trauma for this to happen. Even ordinary dreams can leave marks. A dream about betrayal can make you feel suspicious towards someone you trust. A dream about failure can sap your confidence for a day. It's not irrational. The emotions were rehearsed, not imagined. You lived them, just in a space without consequences. This overlap between dreaming and waking life goes both ways. Real experiences shape what you dream, and dreams reshape how you remember the real. If you dream that you argued with a friend, your next interaction might carry tension you can't explain. Your brain doesn't store dreams and memories in separate drawers. They share networks, and sometimes the wires cross. That's how a dream can stain the edges of reality without you noticing. Artists and writers have always noticed this overlap. They use dream residue as a tool. After waking from a vivid dream, they capture the feeling before the details fade. The emotional texture, confusion, awe, loss, carries truth even when the images don't. The brain doesn't care whether the pain was imagined. It learns from it the same way. A heartbreak in a dream can teach empathy. A nightmare can sharpen awareness. Even when unreal, emotional experience leaves real traces. There's a physiological reason for that persistence. The amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, stays active through REM sleep. It reacts to imagined danger as if it were physical. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, the part that organizes memory, operates differently, allowing fragments to blend. That's why dream logic feels fluid, and why the emotions survive the collapse of the plot. You forget what happened, but not how it felt. The residue is feeling without form. You can see how powerful this is when you wake from a comforting dream instead of a painful one. Maybe you dreamed of someone long gone, and for a few seconds after waking, they feel near. The peace lingers, even as the image dissolves. The feeling doesn't care that it was built on fiction. It colors the morning with a softness that reason can't erase. Dream residue doesn't only hurt, it also heals. Still, the darker side tends to last longer. The brain evolved to remember threats more than pleasures. Fear leaves a deeper groove. That's why bad dreams echo louder than good ones. The residue isn't just memory, it's warning. The mind rehearses danger to prepare for survival, and that instinct doesn't stop at waking. When imagined pain lingers like the real kind, it reveals how thin the border between dream and waking truly is. Consciousness doesn't reboot each morning. It continues, blending what was felt in sleep into what's lived in daylight. You carry both worlds with you, the one that happened and the one that only seemed to. Sometimes the difference matters less than you think, because to the body, pain is pain, and the residue of what never was can still feel exactly like what's true. You start by wondering something small. Does anyone really understand me? It's not a dramatic question, just a quiet one that slips in during still moments. You think about the way you talk to people, the parts of yourself you share, and the pieces you keep hidden. You wonder if anyone sees the whole picture, or if they only see what you allow. The thought feels harmless at first, but the more you examine it, the more distance it creates. The question meant to close the gap becomes the reason it widens. Loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. It often begins in the middle of connection, in a conversation, in a crowded room, even in love. You listen, nod, and play your part, but a quiet layer of observation runs underneath. You start to watch yourself interacting. You notice what you're saying, what you're not saying, what they might be thinking of you. That self-awareness feels like control, but it quietly removes you from the moment. You're no longer in the exchange, you're monitoring it. The more you monitor, the less seen you feel. This is the start of the loneliness loop. You feel unknown, so you step back to analyze how to be known. But in doing so, you become less reachable. People sense the distance, even if they can't name it. They respond to the version of you that's performing closeness, not the one that's behind it. Then the loop tightens. Their reaction confirms your suspicion. They don't really know you. But they can't, because you're no longer showing them the part you want them to see. Psychologists sometimes call this meta-emotion, feeling about your own feelings. When you feel sadness, then feel ashamed for feeling it, you split in two. The same happens with loneliness. You don't just feel disconnected, you start thinking about being disconnected. That second layer amplifies the first. You build a narrative about how hard it is to be understood, and the narrative begins to replace the possibility of connection itself. The story becomes its own barrier. There's a kind of safety in this distance. If no one can truly know you, then no one can truly reject you either. You can protect the most tender parts of yourself by keeping them theoretical. You might even start to prefer the feeling of being unseen because it's predictable. The ache becomes familiar, something you can manage. But comfort built on isolation doesn't stay gentle. Over time, it hardens. You begin to doubt that authenticity is possible at all. You can see this pattern in close relationships. You share your thoughts, your habits, your memories, but not the parts that scare you, the contradictions, the fears that make you feel small. Then you tell yourself that if they really knew you, they might not stay. But that thought hides a deeper truth. You've never given them the chance to know you. You've mistaken protection for honesty. The loneliness isn't coming from their lack of understanding. It's coming from your fear of being seen unfiltered. Social media amplifies this loop. You curate what others see, then feel unseen for what's left out. You want people to connect with your real self, but you've trained them to respond to your projection. Every like and comment feels good for a second, then hollow. Feedback confirms attention, not recognition. The more you post, the more invisible you can start to feel. The loneliness grows, even as the audience expands. The brain doesn't help much here. It evolved to seek belonging, but also to avoid rejection. Those two drives pull against each other constantly. When you open up, vulnerability triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain. When you hold back, isolation triggers the same ones as hunger. The mind oscillates between reaching out and pulling back, creating a cycle that feels both necessary and unbearable. Imagine telling someone something small but honest, a fear, a mistake, a feeling you can't explain. For a moment, you feel lighter. Then the self-monitoring starts. You replay the words, worry about how they were received, wonder if you revealed too much. The relief fades into analysis. You start to edit yourself mid-sentence next time, guarding against that same exposure. What began as connection becomes caution. Every act of honesty feels riskier, and every hesitation feels safer. Sometimes this loop grows from early experience. If you grew up feeling misunderstood or dismissed, your mind learned that being known wasn't safe. You adapted by becoming what others expected. That skill, reading people, mirroring moods, fitting in, can make you socially fluent and emotionally invisible at the same time. You can connect with everyone and still feel unseen by anyone. It's not manipulation, it's survival. But the cost is that every connection carries the quiet fear that it's conditional. There's another layer to this, the illusion of self-knowledge. You might think no one knows you because you don't fully know yourself. The mind is a shifting landscape, full of contradictions and blind spots. Every time you try to define who you are, you change a little. If identity is fluid, then being fully known isn't possible in a fixed way. People can only meet you in the moment, not in the totality. But expecting someone to grasp your entire inner life sets them up to fail. You can test this by noticing what happens when someone surprises you with understanding. Maybe they say something that hits close to the truth. Instead of relief, you might feel discomfort. Being seen breaks the control you've built around how you appear. The loop depends on distance. Closeness threatens its logic. You might even pull away after being understood because it feels too exposing. The irony is sharp. Being seen makes you retreat, and retreating makes you unseen again. The loneliness loop feeds on self-awareness without self-trust. It's the feeling of watching your own reflection while trying to talk through it. The more you ask whether anyone truly knows you, the more you distort the answer. Because to be known, you have to stop observing long enough to be present. But presence requires risk, the willingness to let others see the unpolished, uncertain, shifting version of you, the same one you spend most of your life trying to protect. Wondering if anyone truly knows you changes how they could, because the act of wondering itself builds a wall. You can't think your way into belonging. You can only let it happen in the quiet space where the question finally pauses, where you stop watching yourself long enough for someone else to see you clearly, not as a version, not as an idea, but as the person who has been there all along. Some days, your mind feels full but not clear. Thoughts come one after another, quick and loud, yet none of them land. You reach for something solid, an idea, a plan, a sense of purpose, but everything hums at once, like radio interference. That's existential static, when the mind is active but aimless, searching for meaning while drowning in noise. You might wake up feeling it before you even open your eyes. Your brain starts listing unfinished tasks, half-formed worries, stray hopes. You scroll, think, plan, question, all at once. The energy feels like motion, but it goes nowhere. You're not thinking to understand. You're thinking to stop feeling lost. Each thought promises clarity, but instead it joins the hum. The noise builds until all you can sense is its vibration. This state often arrives in times of uncertainty, when something big has ended or not yet begun. The structure that gave your life shape dissolves, and your mind scrambles to rebuild it. But instead of direction, you get overactivity. The brain fills the gap with questions it can't answer. What's next? Who am I now? What does it all mean? Each question triggers another, looping endlessly. The search for meaning becomes the source of confusion. You can see this pattern in smaller ways too. Imagine sitting at your desk, trying to start a project. You have energy, but it feels scattered. You switch tabs, make lists, check messages. Your hands move, but your focus flickers. The more you try to concentrate, the more fragmented you feel. The thoughts are bright, but disconnected. Ideas without gravity. When you stop, silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels charged, like static before a storm. Psychologists describe something similar when they study cognitive overload. The brain has a limited capacity for processing, and when that capacity fills, coherence disappears, thoughts overlap, attention fractures. But existential static isn't just mental clutter, it's emotional too. It's what happens when the questions driving your mind don't have immediate answers, when meaning itself feels out of reach. The philosopher Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom. When you realize that life has no fixed direction, every choice opens too many possibilities. The freedom to choose becomes the fear of choosing wrong. The brain, built for survival, doesn't know what to do with infinite options. It tries to think its way out, producing thought after thought, each one promising to restore order. But meaning doesn't respond to logic alone, so the thinking never ends. Technology amplifies this state. You can access endless information, endless opinions, endless comparisons. The moment you feel lost, you reach for input, a search result, a quote, a thread. Each click feels like progress, but it's really another layer of noise. You gather fragments of truth that don't connect. The static grows louder, and under it, the quiet feeling of being unanchored grows sharper. Even creativity suffers from this hum. Writers, artists, and thinkers talk about the paralysis that comes from too many ideas. The mind floods with concepts, but none feel real enough to hold. You keep circling the same mental ground, looking for a doorway. It's not laziness, It's excess. When everything could matter, nothing does. This kind of static has a physical edge too. The body mirrors the mind's agitation. Shoulders tense, breathing shortens. The nervous system treats mental noise like a signal of danger. You can't focus because your brain believes you're under threat. But the threat is abstract, not something you can fight or flee. It's the weight of meaninglessness pressing from all sides. Sometimes existential static hides under productivity. You fill every hour with tasks so you don't have to feel the gap between action and purpose. You keep moving to stay ahead of the hum, but the silence always catches up. In the moment before sleep, in the quiet walk home, in the pause between songs. That's when you notice that all the motion hasn't carried you forward. It's just been keeping you afloat. There's a small experiment that reveals how deep the static runs. Sit for 5 minutes with no distractions, no phone, no music, no plan. The first minute feels fine. By the second, your mind starts to buzz. Thoughts rush in, each demanding attention. By the third, the noise feels unbearable. You realize that the hum was always there, masked by activity. The static isn't something that happens to you. It's what fills the space when meaning falls silent. The trick, if there is one, isn't to silence the thoughts, but to stop chasing them. When you stop demanding an answer, the questions lose their urgency. The static softens. The thoughts keep coming, but they no longer crowd each other. You start to hear small signals underneath, fragments of calm, moments of presence, faint notes of what still matters. Meaning doesn't return in a flash. It seeps back slowly between the noise. Existential static is the sound of awareness searching for footing in a world that doesn't guarantee any. It hums through long nights, through routines that once felt clear, through the spaces between certainty and surrender. Every thought buzzes, but none tune in, because tuning in requires stillness. And stillness can only arrive when you stop trying to find the perfect frequency and learn to sit, just for a moment, in the quiet hum of being alive. Comfort feels like the goal of living. You work to earn stability, shape routines, build predictability into your days. You want warmth instead of risk, ease instead of uncertainty. But sometimes, when you get there, a strange restlessness begins to grow. You start to feel trapped by the very safety you built. The stillness that once calmed you starts to press in from all sides. That's the comfort collapse, when the space you made to feel secure slowly turns into one that makes you feel small. At first, you don't notice it. The habits that once helped you survive still look like signs of peace. You go to the same coffee shop, scroll the same feeds, see the same people. The routine feels efficient. But somewhere inside, a quiet part of you starts to itch. It's not boredom exactly, it's awareness. You sense that you've stopped moving. The comfort that once gave you balance now resists change. It tells you that new things are dangerous, that curiosity might ruin the calm you've earned. This happens because comfort and growth rarely share the same space for long. Growth requires friction, the stretching of what you know. Comfort protects you from that friction. The longer you stay in it, the more your world shrinks to fit its borders. You stop testing edges, you stop failing. Which sounds good until you realize you've also stopped evolving. What feels like peace is often just avoidance dressed in soft clothes. Imagine someone who's worked hard to reach stability, a job that pays well, a home that's quiet, a circle of predictable days. For a while, it's everything they wanted. Then, without warning, that satisfaction fades. They wake up and feel a strange emptiness, a sense that every day is a repeat of the last. They aren't unhappy exactly. but they're restless. They've built a life that asks nothing of them, and that lack of demand becomes its own kind of pressure. The comfort they fought for has begun to suffocate them. The brain explains part of this paradox. It evolved to seek homeostasis, balance, but it also evolved to seek novelty. Dopamine, the chemical behind motivation, spikes in response to new challenges, not familiar rewards. Once a situation becomes predictable, the brain stops releasing the same sense of anticipation. Comfort feels good for a while, then flatlines. That flatness isn't failure, it's biology. You're wired to outgrow what once satisfied you. The comfort collapse can also appear in relationships. At the start, connection feels alive, discovery, risk, excitement. Over time, routines replace curiosity. You both settle into patterns that feel safe but dull. You stop asking questions. You stop surprising each other. The relationship doesn't break, it fades into predictability. You tell yourself that stability is love, but part of you misses the electricity of not knowing everything yet. The safety you built together now hides the mystery that first drew you close. This same pattern shows up in identity. You spend years building a version of yourself that works, reliable, competent, stable. People trust you for it, but eventually the version becomes armor. You hesitate to change because change means risking confusion, or disappointing others, or losing the image that's kept you safe. You tell yourself, "This is who I am," but the more you repeat it, the less true it feels. Comfort collapses when the self you maintain stops matching the self that's still trying to grow underneath. You can feel this collapse most acutely in moments of quiet success. You've achieved what you aimed for, but instead of relief, you feel uneasy. The pursuit gave structure to your life. The arrival leaves a void. This is common among people who reach long-term goals: graduates, retirees, parents whose children have grown. The question that once guided them is gone. Without it, even peace can feel like disorientation. Some people mistake this discomfort for ingratitude. They scold themselves for not appreciating what they have. But the feeling isn't lack of gratitude. It's awareness that life isn't meant to be static. The desire for more isn't greed, it's continuation. You can be thankful for safety and still long for aliveness. Those two feelings can coexist, though they pull in opposite directions. Society reinforces the trap by idealizing comfort. You're told that success means control, a life free from uncertainty. But that message confuses peace with paralysis. Control keeps chaos out, but it also keeps change out. When you build your identity around avoiding discomfort, you start mistaking stillness for stability. You forget that the muscles of resilience only strengthen when stretched. The comfort collapse doesn't announce itself dramatically. It begins as a quiet hum, an unease that's easy to drown in distraction. You keep busy, scroll longer, schedule more, hoping the static will fade. But distraction only delays it. Beneath the noise, the question stays: what part of you has stopped growing because it's too safe to move? You can feel this most clearly in moments when life hands you a small disruption. A plan falls through. A conversation surprises you. Something forces you out of routine. At first, it feels uncomfortable. But then, unexpectedly, there's a pulse, a flash of alertness you didn't realize you'd missed. That pulse is your mind remembering what aliveness feels like. The collapse cracks open for a moment, and through it, you glimpse something wider. Comfort is necessary. It's the ground you stand on. But when safety becomes the goal instead of the base, the walls close in. The mind begins to decay in its own shelter. What once kept you warm begins to dim your vision. The only way out is risk, small or large, the deliberate act of stepping toward uncertainty again, not to destroy peace, but to rediscover motion inside it. Because without motion, even safety starts to resemble a cage, sturdy, familiar, and quietly closing in. Awareness sounds simple. You sit quietly, notice your thoughts, and let them pass. It seems like you're watching something separate from you, a stream of mental activity you can observe without interference. But the moment you look, the scene shifts. The thought you were trying to notice changes shape. The act of attention alters what it touches. That's the observer paradox, the strange truth that you can't look at your own mind without changing what you see. This idea isn't new. In physics, it mirrors the observer effect, where measuring a particle affects its behavior. The same principle applies to consciousness. Observation introduces awareness, and awareness changes the process being observed. You can't catch a raw thought because the instant you try, it becomes self-conscious. It adapts to your scrutiny, like a wild animal pausing when it senses it's being watched. You can test this easily. Close your eyes and wait for a thought to appear. Maybe it's something simple, what you'll eat later, a memory from the morning, an image of nothing in particular. Now, try to look at it directly. You might notice that it fades or transforms. A second ago, it was spontaneous. Now, it's curated. The brain doesn't like being watched. It tries to perform. This is because thought and attention share the same space. They aren't two separate things. When you pay attention to a thought, you don't step outside of it, you enter it more deeply. Awareness modifies the pattern of neurons firing, just as tuning an instrument changes its sound. The more you observe, the more the system reorganizes itself around the act of observation. Meditation teaches this in a slow, gentle way. At first, people think the goal is to watch thoughts without reacting, but what they find is that even observation is a form of reaction. The thought, once noticed, behaves differently. It slows, fragments, or disappears. The awareness changes its lifespan. In that sense, stillness isn't found by watching the mind, but by allowing the watching to soften, noticing without grasping. There's a story teachers sometimes tell to explain this. A student asks how to quiet the mind. The teacher says, "Show me your mind, and I'll quiet it for you." The student looks inward and says, "I can't find it." The teacher replies, "Then it's already quiet." The point isn't mystical, it's practical. The moment you look for the thinker, you shift from thinking to awareness, and the noise changes. The observer changes the observed. Psychology recognizes a version of this too. Cognitive behavioral therapy relies on metacognition, the ability to think about thinking. When you become aware of a thought pattern, it loses some of its control, but it doesn't stay neutral. The awareness rewires it. You replace automatic reactions with reflective responses. Self-observation doesn't freeze the mind in place. It reshapes it through feedback. This paradox can become unsettling when you chase authenticity. You might ask, "What am I really thinking?" But the really assumes there's a version of your mind untouched by observation. There isn't. The moment you ask, you interfere. You become both scientist and subject. The thought you get isn't pure data, it's a result of the experiment. The more you chase the unfiltered mind, the more filtered it becomes. You can see this clearly when you try to analyze emotions. Suppose you feel anger. You turn attention toward it, hoping to understand why it's there. But awareness starts to dissolve it. You watch the heat fade, the edges blur. You're no longer angry, you're studying anger. The feeling you wanted to understand slips away. In one sense, that's healing. In another, it's distortion. The anger changes not because it was resolved, but because it was observed. Writers experience a similar tension when they try to describe their thoughts honestly. The moment they put a feeling into words, it transforms. Language simplifies. The act of translating emotion into sentences fixes something fluid into form. The rawness disappears, replaced by representation. Observation again reshapes the original. Social interaction mirrors this too. You're never quite yourself when you know you're being watched. Self-consciousness enters the room. You adjust your words, your tone, your expression. Even when you want to be genuine, the awareness of observation alters behavior. You're not pretending, you're responding to the presence of the observer, even if that observer is you. Neuroscience supports this dynamic. When you turn attention inward, different brain networks switch on, notably the prefrontal cortex, which handles reflection and control. That shift suppresses the default mode network, which produces spontaneous thought. The more you monitor the mind, the less spontaneous it becomes. Observation isn't passive. It changes which parts of the brain are active. Your thoughts literally function differently when watched. This explains why mindfulness can feel like both freedom and frustration. The freedom comes from seeing thoughts as transient, not absolute. The frustration comes from realizing you can't observe them without changing them. You might feel calm, but part of you wonders if the calm is genuine or constructed. The mind becomes both actor and audience, looping endlessly. The paradox deepens when you consider identity. You say, "I'm aware of my thoughts," but who is the I? The moment you turn attention toward the observer, it becomes another thought to watch, then another. The process repeats until you see there's no fixed observer, only layers of awareness watching themselves. The self is a moving spotlight, not a stationary witness. This isn't a flaw in consciousness, it's its nature. The mind is self-referential. It builds itself by watching itself. That loop is what allows reflection, learning, and change. But it also creates unease, because it means you can never stand completely outside your own experience. Every act of introspection reshapes the mind that's doing the introspecting. You can't take a photograph of a flame without capturing a different shape every second. You can't watch your thoughts without changing them, because thought and observation are the same process seen from two angles. The moment awareness enters, the current shifts. The more you look, the more the pattern rearranges itself around your gaze. The paradox isn't a problem to solve. It's a reminder that consciousness isn't a window, but a mirror, clear enough to see through, but always reflecting the act of seeing itself. Love feels like the one thing that shouldn't be reduced. It's supposed to rise above logic, a force that defies analysis. But science doesn't stop at feelings. It pulls apart the chemistry of attraction, the hormones behind attachment, the brain patterns of desire. It tells you that the butterflies in your stomach are adrenaline, that the warmth you feel when you hold someone's hand is oxytocin, and that the ache of loss is the absence of dopamine. The story sounds mechanical. It replaces mystery with molecules. But when you see love as biology, does it lose its poetry? Or does the poetry live inside the biology itself? The first time you fall in love, it feels infinite. The world sharpens. Colors seem brighter. Time bends, and every thought circles back to one person. Science calls this limerence, a state of obsessive focus driven by neurotransmitters. Dopamine surges, making every moment with them feel rewarding. Norepinephrine speeds your heartbeat. Serotonin drops, amplifying obsession. Your brain turns into a feedback loop of wanting. It feels like destiny, but it's circuitry. Knowing that doesn't dull the experience, it explains why it feels so consuming. The chemistry of love serves an evolutionary purpose. The early rush of attraction pulls two people together long enough to bond. The attachment phase, driven by oxytocin and vasopressin, builds stability. These chemicals encourage loyalty and comfort. They make long-term connection feel safe. From a biological view, it's survival. Pair bonding ensures care, reproduction, and protection. Yet inside that function, the emotional experience feels anything but mechanical. Biology provides the framework, but consciousness fills it with meaning. You can think of it like music. A song is just vibrations organized through math and physics, but that doesn't make it less beautiful. Understanding the frequency doesn't erase the feeling. It might even deepen it. When you realize that your body has evolved to translate chemistry into emotion, you see how finely tuned the system is. It's not random. It's art made of molecules. Still, the reduction can feel cold. Imagine someone telling you that your favorite love poem is only paper and ink. The structure matters, but it's the emotion that gives it life. When love is framed as a set of biological responses, it can seem like meaning evaporates. You start to wonder if affection is real, or if it's just the brain tricking itself into survival. The thought can make love feel fragile, as if understanding it too well might ruin it. But that reaction says more about how we think of meaning. We assume that mystery gives life depth, that once something is explained, it loses its soul. Yet explanation doesn't remove experience, it expands it. Knowing that your heartbeat quickens because your brain is flooded with dopamine doesn't make the moment less real. It's still your pulse, your feeling, your choice to care. Science describes the process, but it can't capture the story you attach to it. Take long-term love. The early rush fades, replaced by a steadier calm. Neuroscience calls this the transition from passion to attachment. The novelty-driven chemicals settle, and the brain shifts to systems that promote trust and routine. Some people mistake this for love fading, but it's love maturing. The quiet comfort of shared mornings, the ease of silence, the instinct to reach for someone's hand without thinking. These are also biological, but they carry a different kind of poetry. They speak to how the brain learns safety through repetition, how the heart maps another person's rhythm until it becomes your own. Even heartbreak follows the same laws. When a bond breaks, the withdrawal mirrors addiction. Dopamine and oxytocin levels drop. The reward system starves, and the body aches as if it's in physical pain. The science explains the suffering, but it also validates it. You're not weak for missing someone. Your entire nervous system was trained around their presence. The ache isn't just emotional. It's physiological evidence that you cared. The poetry of love may not disappear in biology. It might live there. The shiver when someone brushes your arm, the calm that settles when they say your name, the way a memory warms you months later. All of these are biological events that feel transcendent because they connect mind and body. Love is where evolution and awareness meet. The chemistry fires, and consciousness turns it into meaning. There's a moment in every relationship when you see both truths at once. You look at someone you love and recognize that every signal, the flush in your skin, the pupils widening, the heartbeat sinking, is measurable. Yet none of it feels like math. The experience rises above the explanation. Biology provides the foundation, but what you build on it is uniquely human. The question isn't whether love loses its poetry when it's explained. It's whether you see poetry as something that needs mystery to exist. You can understand the mechanics of a flame and still feel warmth when you stand near it. You can learn that stars are burning spheres of gas and still feel awe when you look at them. The biology of love doesn't shrink it. It shows how deeply it runs, that even at the level of cells and signals, the body has been writing poetry long before you learned to name it as love. You spend years collecting things that seem to add up: degrees, experiences, relationships, titles, memories. You build a life one piece at a time, believing that when the numbers get high enough, the equation will balance. But one day you stop, look around, and realize that the total doesn't feel complete. All the inputs are there, yet the sum feels vague, unsteady, uncertain. It's the strange arithmetic of meaning, where everything you add still feels like it equals nothing certain. This kind of emptiness doesn't announce itself dramatically. It creeps in through quiet questions. You've done what you were supposed to do. You've followed the logic of progress. Work hard, plan ahead, make good choices. The math should work. Yet, something feels missing, like a variable you forgot to include. You keep checking the formula, trying to find the mistake, but the issue isn't in the numbers. It's in what the numbers can't measure. We treat meaning like a calculation. If I achieve this, if I earn that, if I reach here, then I'll feel fulfilled. It's a simple equation: effort in, satisfaction out. But the brain doesn't operate that way. Dopamine rewards pursuit, not possession. The excitement peaks in anticipation, not arrival. The moment you get what you wanted, the system resets. You start looking for the next thing to add. It's not failure, it's function. The math keeps you moving, but it never lets you rest. Imagine someone who's been climbing a career ladder for years. They've reached the position they once dreamed of. The income is steady, the respect real, yet each day feels heavier. The victories don't taste like they used to. They start setting new goals, more money, new projects, different titles, hoping the next number will fix the emptiness. But it doesn't. The problem isn't the job. It's that they've mistaken accumulation for arrival. The adding never stops, because the equation was never meant to end. This doesn't only happen in work. It happens in relationships too. You collect moments, shared photos, anniversaries, promises. You build a history. But at some point, you might look at the person beside you and feel a distance that the math can't explain. You love them, but you also sense something unspoken. A drift between what you have and what you feel. You try to fill it with gestures, trips, distractions, but the gap remains. The numbers add up, yet something inside refuses to balance. Philosophers call this the problem of meaning in abundance. When everything is available, value becomes harder to locate. Modern life multiplies your inputs, more information, more options, more connections, but each one dilutes the weight of the others. You can talk to anyone, read anything, buy nearly whatever you want. The scale of choice makes certainty fragile. When everything is possible, nothing feels definitive. You see this play out online. The endless scroll gives you access to knowledge, art, humor, beauty, all at once. But the effect isn't enrichment, it's saturation. You can't tell what matters because everything arrives at the same volume. The mind, built for scarcity, can't assign meaning when there's no contrast. So it flattens. You feel full but unfed, informed but unsure. Adding more only deepens the sense of nothing certain. This emptiness isn't hopeless. It's the byproduct of awareness. Once you start to notice that the math doesn't work, you're seeing something true. Meaning doesn't accumulate through addition, it emerges through relation. Two small experiences that connect can feel richer than 100 that don't. A quiet evening of real attention can outweigh a month of noise. The numbers themselves aren't the problem. It's believing they can sum to something final. The human brain craves closure. It wants the equation to end with an equal sign, a result that says, this is enough. But life resists that kind of certainty. The more you live, the more variables appear. Even happiness contains its opposite. You love someone deeply, and with that comes fear of loss. You achieve something big, and immediately you sense time moving forward again. Nothing stays solved for long. There's an experiment in psychology known as the hedonic treadmill. It shows how people return to a baseline level of happiness no matter what happens, good or bad. You win the lottery, and after a few months, your emotional state returns to normal. You suffer a setback, and after some time, it also levels out. The equation balances itself, not through addition, but through adaptation. The constant search for more doesn't increase meaning, it resets the scale. Even memory plays into this math. You think you're adding to your life by collecting experiences, but memory doesn't store them all equally. It compresses, edits, and rewrites. Over time, the highlights blur together, and what you thought was accumulation becomes abstraction. You're left with impressions, not totals. What remains meaningful isn't the number of moments, but the few that changed how you see everything else. The emptiness that follows adding everything is a quiet teacher. It shows that meaning can't be built through quantity or certainty. You can sum your achievements, possessions, and moments, but the answer will always fluctuate. Life refuses to resolve neatly because it's not an equation to solve, it's a process to live through. The more you add, the more you see that the total keeps changing, and that maybe the beauty lies not in what balances, but in what remains open.